Hey guys, how all of you beautiful people are doing? And yes, this is a new series, Accidental Gamer Hero. I accidentally saved the world and was granted 3 wishes when I died. Easy. First wish to reincarnate in the Naruto universe, and second is to reincarnate with the gamer ability. Third wish, I'll save it for later. /OC. So let's start without any delay. Congratulations! You have discovered the hidden boss. Warning, you cannot leave the dungeon until after the hidden boss has been eliminated. There is no time limit. Kill or be killed. Just as I received the warning, the ground in front of me, i.e. the grave of Uchiha Zakufaru, gave a brief rumble before the tombstone exploded upwards. I jumped back from the sudden eruption and witnessed what came out of it. A figure, holding a comically large Zanbato, flew out of the ground and landed on the ground near the metal box containing the severed head which I just opened. In response, I brought out Jinchumaru, and thereafter channeling chakra into the chain sickle to activate chakra flow. Now that the figure stopped moving, I could take a good look at it with my Sharingan enhanced vision. The hidden boss was clad in some sort of a military uniform, with a sleeveless black top, black cargo pants, combat boots and 2 black shoulder pauldrons. But what struck me the most was its conspicuous lack of a head and the giant sword resting on its shoulder. The sword was reminiscent of Zabuza's Kubakiri Bocho, except it had a more angular tip, which I now recognized was the tombstone of the grave, rather than Kubakiri Bocho's curved blade. Recognizing the entity in front of me as a threat, I used Observe to check its status. Rank F Dungeon Hidden Boss, Dullahan LV20. HP, 8000. CP, 3000. The headless undead of a powerful soldier long forgotten in the current era. He is furious at the one who has disturbed his eternal rest and seeks to kill them for it. He wants to cut off your head. This was the first monster I encountered that had CP. Furthermore, despite its higher level, it had a lower HP than the Kinnikubaker I just fought, which could only imply that its stats were more balanced than the tanky zombie. The Dullahan reached for the metal box, seemingly keen on retrieving its head, but I was no fool. I refused to give it the chance to reunite with its head. So I took the opportunity to throw the sickle end of the Kuzarigama at the hidden boss, intent on preventing the reunion, thinking that without its head the headless zombie would probably not be able to see the attack. The sickle flew towards the zombie, empowered by chakra flow and power strike. The blade was aimed towards the arm holding its sword. I wanted to either slice off its wrist such that the large weapon could not be used against me, or at least get it to drop the sword. However, I underestimated its senses without its head, as the Dullahan swung the large sword, faster than I thought it would with the overweight weapon, and smacked the sickle away. I cursed, but I wasn't about to give up the chance when it was still distracted without its head. With renewed confidence in my close combat skills after I utterly trounced the Kinnikubaker, I drew Kotetsu no Ryu and used Flash Step to appear within striking distance of the Dullahan. I raised my blade and struck down, intending to bisect the hidden boss. To my surprise, however, the Dullahan blocked my attack with its own blade held with just a single arm, quite handily at that. Even so, that was something I had considered a possibility, thus I immediately slipped underneath the blade to cut its side. The Dullahan, while not as towering as the Kinnikubaker, was still a good 6 feet tall. Thus, I was able to exploit my much smaller and nimbler frame to circle its flank. Also, I thought, before the Dullahan's fist crashed into my sternum and sent me flying away. -368 HP. Cake. I wailed in pain, the air knocked out of my body, as I rolled on the floor briefly before I caught myself in a crouched stance. That bastard, I didn't even see his hand move. It was fast, faster than anything I had faced before. The headless undead didn't even bother following up with its attack, as it only focused on retrieving its own head. It reached into the metal box and pulled up the head, before nestling it under his left arm. I could finally take a good look at the severed head. It, or rather he, now that I could properly see what the Dullahan looked like, had spiky black hair characteristic of Uchihas. The skin, however, had the trademarked look of a withering corpse with shriveled skin, sunken eyes and prominent cheekbones. His eyes, thankfully, lacked the red of a Sharingan. "You disturb rest. I take your head." The creature had a raspy voice, which made sense considering the lack of a tether to any sort of vocal cords and diaphragm. Although speaking when it was just a head didn't make sense in the first place, but considering the situation I was in, it was the least of my worries. After croaking out those words, the Dullahan sped towards me. But not in the obvious, one-direction trajectory of the previous boss monster. It fucking zigzagged. Yet, under my Sharingan eyes, I could track his movements easily enough. I swiped the Kusarigama, extending the weighted end of the chain towards where it was going towards. The spiked weight whipped at its feet, and unlike my previous attempts, made contact. The chain wrapped around one of his feet. Seeing my success, I pulled at the chain to attempt to disrupt his balance. It worked for only a brief moment, until the Dullahan stabbed its large sword at the chain, pinning its links between the blade and the ground. The chain was reinforced with chakra, so it wouldn't break that easily, but my attempts at pulling the chain were granted no further allowance. I expected the Dullahan to put down his head, reach down and pull the chain with its other arm, but it did not do so. The creature just ran towards me instead of taking advantage of the chain he had restrained. It seemed that the Dullahan was not willing to part with the head he had just recovered. That was something I could use to my advantage if the headless warrior was functionally fighting one-handed. My chains were still attached to the undead's feet, but I wouldn't be able to do anything with it since the Dullahan was running faster than I could pull back the chain. As such, I released the handle of my sickle, but wrapped my wrist around the chain in midair and flew through a certain set of hand seals rapidly. Kaiten, Gakeikiyu no Jutsu. I expelled the fireball out of my mouth and along the chain that was still attached to my wrist and the Dullahan's leg. With its speed, I wanted to make sure it couldn't avoid the fireball, and thus the chain would guide the flames to its intended target. But it didn't need to avoid it. The Dullahan merely stopped in its tracks, drew his sword back and waved it at the fireball when it was about to reach him. The flat of the massive blade struck the fireball and the creature actually tried batting the fireball away. However, that wasn't how the grand fireball technique worked. The flaming sphere wasn't a tangible ball that could be deflected. It was an amalgamation of flames that would explode once it made contact with something. The deflection mitigated much of the damage, but the grand fireball still exploded and engulfed the creature in flames with a loud boom. Taking this time the undead was distracted, I leaped backwards as far as the chain that bound us allowed in order to survey the damage I had inflicted. Once most of the bright blaze scattered, I laid my eyes on a flaming Dullahan that stood undisturbed among the fire. Rank F Dungeon Hidden Boss, Dullahan LV20. HP, 7752. CP, 2531. I almost fell into despair at the sight of the measly damage I had done to him with a 600 CP Grand Fireball. But something interesting that drew my attention was his CP that was rapidly ticking down with every moment passing. Some sort of chakra armor perhaps. One that absorbed the damage being taken in exchange of CP. But then why did his HP fall when such an armor was active? Was it the explosiveness of the fireball that dealt the damage? Something with enough momentum the chakra armor couldn't block? I had many questions but not enough time to answer them as the Dullahan shook off the remnants of the fire and continued its run at me. Cursing, I formed a hand seal, Bunshin no Jutsu. A dozen clones popped into existence amidst smoke around me. While I dearly wanted to stand from a distance and throw fireballs at the monster, I still had to keep in mind my CP reserves. Especially with Sharingan and chakra flow continuously consuming my chakra, I had to pay attention to how much chakra I was expending. The dozen clones I just created took 20 CP each, and that was not counting the chakra I wasted with my subpar control. My clones and I ran towards the Dullahan, meeting it in the middle. The first of the clones reached it first, with Kotetsu no Ryu in hand, from different directions to confuse the Dullahan. But the superfluously large blade was a weapon that thrived when fighting against large numbers, the Dullahan proving so by eliminating 4 of the clones with just a single swipe. But the clones were merely a distraction anyways. I was the proverbial blade in the dark that took advantage of the brief lapse in its attention to deliver a killing blow. Which was what I had planned, but turns out the saying, "No plan survives first contact with the enemy" was true. The second swipe of the blade, which I had just realized I had yet to witness from the creature until now, came back harder and faster, forcing me to bend over backwards to narrowly avoid the sword. Another 3 clones vanished into smoke, but the conspicuous action I took to preserve my life unlike my clones made it obvious I wasn't one. The severed head that was tucked under the Dullahan's arm turned its eyes toward me as it grinned, identifying me as the real target. His leg snapped towards me in a kick, but this time I saw it coming with my Sharingan and managed to kawarimi myself with a chunk of a shattered tombstone behind the creature. The stone shattered into even finer pieces upon impact, but it didn't matter as I was already in place to cut down the Dullahan. I swung the katana forward, cutting into its flesh. However, the blade only sliced in skin deep. It was like there were steel plates underneath its skin that blocked my sword from going any deeper. I widened my eyes in surprise, before realizing that it had to be the chakra armor that was siphoning its chakra to prevent or reduce the damage going through. The creature's Zanbato flew towards me as the Dullahan swung around violently. It was fast, but since I was ready for the attack, I could see it coming from a mile away. I ducked under the wild swing and rolled forward to hit my next target, the severed head that was being carried around. Traditional game mechanics dictated that every boss monster would have an obvious weakness. For the previous boss, it was its extremely slow speed. And for this finely balanced boss with all of its stats exceeding my own, the head was an obvious weak spot. Seeing that I was targeting it, the severed head twisted into a murderous glare and the Dullahan actually used its own body to block my attack. My stab sunk an inch deep into the torso of the Dullahan, but no deeper. I leaped backwards, satisfied with the brief exchange that netted me valuable info. The Dullahan was evidently extremely protective of its head, which confirmed my theory. All of my previous attacks after the fireball did 0 damage to the Dullahan's HP, although his CP reduced every time I made contact. It made almost no effort blocking attacks towards its body, but the moment I aimed at the severed head, the Dullahan was willing to throw his own body towards my attack to stop it. Which probably meant that the Dullahan's head was the only part of its body that was not covered by its chakra armor. So the great fireball's AoE damage had actually hit the head and was the cause of the lost HP of the Dullahan. Thus, I had to focus my attacks on the head. The severed head in question glared at me, its face distorted in anger. The Dullahan, who had thus far been fighting without much forethought nor caution, now settled into a rough stance, with the Zanbato lifted from his shoulders and positioned in front of him. Then, through the chakra sight my Sharingan eyes afforded me, I watched as an undulating blue glow spread from its sternum and quickly shrouded his body. Was this chakra enhancement? This damned undead could use chakra enhancement, but I couldn't. How emasculating. Wait. My Sharingan eyes, shouldn't it able to copy? Through the effects of Sharingan, you have acquired a new skill. Chakra enhancement has been added to your skill page. Chakra enhancement, active, LVL, 1. CP cost. Your physical capabilities are enhanced with chakra. Effects are improved proportionate to the amount of chakra used, however your physical stats and chakra control limits the extent of the reinforcement. Congratulations! You have discovered the hidden boss. Warning, you cannot leave the dungeon until after the hidden boss has been eliminated. There is no time limit. Kill or be killed. Just as I received the warning, the ground in front of me, i.e. the grave of Uchiha Zakufaru, gave a brief rumble before the tombstone exploded upwards. I jumped back from the sudden eruption and witnessed what came out of it. A figure, holding a comically large Zanbato, flew out of the ground and landed on the ground near the metal box containing the severed head which I just opened. In response, I brought out Jinchumaru, and thereafter channeling chakra into the chain sickle to activate chakra flow. Now that the figure stopped moving, I could take a good look at it with my Sharingan enhanced vision. The hidden boss was clad in some sort of a military uniform, with a sleeveless black top, black cargo pants, combat boots and 2 black shoulder pauldrons. But what struck me the most was its conspicuous lack of a head and the giant sword resting on its shoulder. The sword was reminiscent of Zabuza's Kubakiri Bocho, except it had a more angular tip which I now recognized was the tombstone of the grave, rather than Kubakiri Bocho's curved blade. Recognizing the entity in front of me as a threat, I used Observe to check its status. Rank F Dungeon Hidden Boss, Dullahan LV 20. HP, 8000. CP, 3000. The headless undead of a powerful soldier long forgotten in the current era. He is furious at the one who has disturbed his eternal rest and seeks to kill them for it. He wants to cut off your head. This was the first monster I encountered that had CP. Furthermore, despite its higher level, it had a lower HP than the Kinekubaker I just fought, which could only imply that its stats were more balanced than the tanky zombie. The Dullahan reached for the metal box, seemingly keen on retrieving its head, but I was no fool. I refused to give it the chance to reunite with its head. So I took the opportunity to throw the sickle end of the Kuzarigama at the hidden boss, intent on preventing the reunion, thinking that without its head the headless zombie would probably not be able to see the attack. The sickle flew towards the zombie, empowered by chakra flow and power strike. The blade was aimed towards the arm holding its sword. I wanted to either slice off its wrist such that the large weapon could not be used against me, or at least get it to drop the sword. However, I underestimated its senses without its head, as the Dullahan swung the large sword, faster than I thought it would with the overweight weapon, and smacked the sickle away. I cursed, but I wasn't about to give up the chance when it was still distracted without its head. With renewed confidence in my close combat skills after I utterly trounced the Kinekubaker, I drew Kotetsu no Ryu and used Flash Step to appear within striking distance of the Dullahan. I raised my blade and struck down, intending to bisect the hidden boss. To my surprise, however, the Dullahan blocked my attack with its own blade held with just a single arm, quite handily at that. Even so, that was something I had considered a possibility, thus I immediately slipped underneath the blade to cut its side. The Dullahan, while not as towering as the Kinniku Baker, was still a good 6 feet tall. Thus, I was able to exploit my much smaller and nimbler frame to circle its flank. Also I thought, before the Dullahan's fist crashed into my sternum and sent me flying away. -368 HP. Cake. I wailed in pain, the air knocked out of my body, as I rolled on the floor briefly before I caught myself in a crouched stance. That bastard, I didn't even see his hand move. It was fast, faster than anything I had faced before. The headless undead didn't even bother following up with its attack, as it only focused on retrieving its own head. It reached into the metal box and pulled up the head, before nestling it under his left arm. I could finally take a good look at the severed head. It, or rather he, now that I could properly see what the Dullahan looked like, had spiky black hair characteristic of Uchiha's. The skin, however, had the trademarked look of a withering corpse with shriveled skin, sunken eyes and prominent cheekbones. His eyes, thankfully, lacked the red of a Sharingan. "You disturb rest. I take your head." The creature had a raspy voice, which made sense considering the lack of a tether to any sort of vocal cords and diaphragm. Although speaking when it was just a head didn't make sense in the first place, but considering the situation I was in, it was the least of my worries. After croaking out those words, the Dullahan sped towards me. But not in the obvious, one-direction trajectory of the previous boss monster. It fucking zigzagged. Yet, under my Sharingan eyes, I could track his movements easily enough. I swiped the Kusarigama, extending the weighted end of the chain towards where it was going towards. The spiked weight whipped at its feet, and unlike my previous attempts, made contact. The chain wrapped around one of his feet. Seeing my success, I pulled at the chain to attempt to disrupt his balance. It worked for only a brief moment, until the Dullahan stabbed its large sword at the chain, pinning its links between the blade and the ground. The chain was reinforced with chakra, so it wouldn't break that easily, but my attempts at pulling the chain were granted no further allowance. I expected the Dullahan to put down his head, reach down and pull the chain with its other arm, but it did not do so. The creature just ran towards me instead of taking advantage of the chain he had restrained. It seemed that the Dullahan was not willing to part with the head he had just recovered. That was something I could use to my advantage if the headless warrior was functionally fighting one-handed. My chains were still attached to the undead's feet, but I wouldn't be able to do anything with it since the Dullahan was running faster than I could pull back the chain. As such, I released the handle of my sickle, but wrapped my wrist around the chain in midair and flew through a certain set of hand seals rapidly. Kaiten, Gakeikiyu no Jutsu. I expelled the fireball out of my mouth and along the chain that was still attached to my wrist and the Dullahan's leg. With its speed, I wanted to make sure it couldn't avoid the fireball, and thus the chain would guide the flames to its intended target. But it didn't need to avoid it. The Dullahan merely stopped in its tracks, drew his sword back and waved it at the fireball when it was about to reach him. The flat of the massive blade struck the fireball and the creature actually tried batting the fireball away. However, that wasn't how the grand fireball technique worked. The flaming sphere wasn't a tangible ball that could be deflected. It was an amalgamation of flames that would explode once it made contact with something. The deflection mitigated much of the damage, but the grand fireball still exploded and engulfed the creature in flames with a loud boom. Taking this time the undead was distracted, I leaped backwards as far as the chain that bound us allowed in order to survey the damage I had inflicted. Once most of the bright blaze scattered, I laid my eyes on a flaming Dullahan that stood undisturbed among the fire. Rank F Dungeon Hidden Boss, Dullahan LV20. HP, 7752. CP, 2531. I almost fell into despair at the sight of the measly damage I had done to him with a 600 CP grand fireball. But something interesting that drew my attention was his CP that was rapidly ticking down with every moment passing. Some sort of chakra armor perhaps. One that absorbed the damage being taken in exchange of CP. But then why did his HP fall when such an armor was active? Was it the explosiveness of the fireball that dealt the damage? Something with enough momentum the chakra armor couldn't block? I had many questions but not enough time to answer them as the Dullahan shook off the remnants of the fire and continued its run at me. Cursing, I formed a hand seal, Bunshin no Jutsu. A dozen clones popped into existence amidst smoke around me. While I dearly wanted to stand from a distance and throw fireballs at the monster, I still had to keep in mind my CP reserves. Especially with Sharingan and chakra flow continuously consuming my chakra, I had to pay attention to how much chakra I was expending. The dozen clones I just created took 20 CP each, and that was not counting the chakra I wasted with my subpar control. My clones and I ran towards the Dullahan, meeting it in the middle. The first of the clones reached it first, with Kotetsu no Ryu in hand, from different directions to confuse the Dullahan. But the superfluously large blade was a weapon that thrived when fighting against large numbers, the Dullahan proving so by eliminating 4 of the clones with just a single swipe. But the clones were merely a distraction anyways. I was the proverbial blade in the dark that took advantage of the brief lapse in its attention to deliver a killing blow. Which was what I had planned, but turns out the saying, no plan survives first contact with the enemy was true. The second swipe of the blade, which I had just realized I had yet to witness from the creature until now, came back harder and faster, forcing me to bend over backwards to narrowly avoid the sword. Another 3 clones vanished into smoke, but the conspicuous action I took to preserve my life unlike my clones made it obvious I wasn't one. The severed head that was tucked under the Dullahan's arm turned its eyes toward me as it grinned, identifying me as the real target. His leg snapped towards me in a kick, but this time I saw it coming with my Sharingan and managed to kawarimi myself with a chunk of a shattered tombstone behind the creature. The stone shattered into even finer pieces upon impact, but it didn't matter as I was already in place to cut down the Dullahan. I swung the katana forward, cutting into its flesh. However, the blade only sliced in skin deep. It was like there were steel plates underneath its skin that blocked my sword from going any deeper. I widened my eyes in surprise, before realizing that it had to be the chakra armor that was siphoning its chakra to prevent or reduce the damage going through. The creature's Zanbato flew towards me as the Dullahan swung around violently. It was fast, but since I was ready for the attack, I could see it coming from a mile away. I ducked under the wild swing and rolled forward to hit my next target, the severed head that was being carried around. Traditional game mechanics dictated that every boss monster would have an obvious weakness. For the previous boss, it was its extremely slow speed. And for this finely balanced boss with all of its stats exceeding my own, the head was an obvious weak spot. Seeing that I was targeting it, the severed head twisted into a murderous glare and the Dullahan actually used its own body to block my attack. My stab sunk an inch deep into the torso of the Dullahan, but no deeper. I leaped backwards, satisfied with the brief exchange that netted me valuable info. The Dullahan was evidently extremely protective of its head, which confirmed my theory. All of my previous attacks after the fireball did 0 damage to the Dullahan's HP, although his CP reduced every time I made contact. It made almost no effort blocking attacks towards its body, but the moment I aimed at the severed head, the Dullahan was willing to throw his own body towards my attack to stop it. Which probably meant that the Dullahan's head was the only part of its body that was not covered by its chakra armor. So the great fireball's AoE damage had actually hit the head and was the cause of the lost HP of the Dullahan. Thus, I had to focus my attacks on the head. The severed head in question glared at me, its face distorted in anger. The Dullahan, who had thus far been fighting without much forethought nor caution, now settled into a rough stance, with the Zanbato lifted from his shoulders and positioned in front of him. Then, through the chakra sight my Sharingan eyes afforded me, I watched as an undulating blue glow spread from its sternum and quickly shrouded his body. Was this chakra enhancement? This damned undead could use chakra enhancement, but I couldn't. How emasculating. Wait. My Sharingan eyes, shouldn't it able to copy? Through the effects of Sharingan, you have acquired a new skill. Chakra enhancement has been added to your skill page. Chakra enhancement, active, LVL, 1. CP cost. Your physical capabilities are enhanced with chakra. Effects are improved proportionate to the amount of chakra used, however your physical stats and chakra control limits the extent of the reinforcement. As I was distracted and grinning from the new notification, from the corner of my eye the Dullahan sprinted at me, at least twice as fast as it was moving previously. Even though I could see the undead moving towards me, I realized that all I could do was see it. The creature reached me faster than I could react. Or more accurately, faster than my body could react. I couldn't even use Flash Step or the Kawarimi to move myself out of harm's way before a deadly swing of its Zanbato cut into my body. I tried to block the attack with my arm at least, my limbs were moving too slowly for that even if my eyes and brain could process what was happening. I had barely been able to move half a step back, and that was the only reason why I hadn't been bisected where I stood. But the blade still left a bloody gash diagonally across my torso. I flew back from the impact, an arch of blood spurting out of my chest and splattering the ground. Minus 1208 HP. What the fuck? That one swing from its oversized Zanbato had removed nearly half of my maximum HP. The sting from the wound held on for just a moment before vanishing. The encroaching dread from the almost fatal wound I just received was cleared from my mind thanks to Gamer's Mind, but I could still feel the pressing need to come up with something to deal with this situation, otherwise, I was going to die here. I couldn't even feel the fear for my life in this precarious life or death situation. While I was thankful for the lack of an unnecessary and burdensome distraction that would affect my tactical thinking, it was also strangely bizarre that I felt almost nothing in what was assuredly the closest I had come to dying. Ever. But Gamer's Mind refused to allow me such a diversion, even if it would comfort any possible existential crisis. No, it forced me to be completely conscious and aware of the fight. It erased any hints of hesitation or unnecessary mental hindrances that would hold me back from performing at 100%. It was useful for a fight, yes, but I had a feeling it was something that would have its repercussions when I had the luxury to ponder upon it more. Regardless, I had a fight to win before I would have the opportunity to explore my feelings. My wound was shallow, I assume due mainly to my gamous body preventing any infliction of injuries that would impede my battle competency rather than the lack of skill and strength from my enemy. If not for gamous body, the Dullahan's Zanbato would have carved halfway through my torso even if it didn't bisect me entirely. I immediately activated my newly acquired skill, Chakra Enhancement, to reinforce my body's physical capabilities. I could feel its effects at once. My bruised and battered body received an overwhelming vitality, and my muscles were energized beyond belief. If I had the leisure to check my stats, it would probably show that my physical stats were doubled, or so I assumed from the sheer intensity of the skill's enhancement. The Dullahan was not willing to let me recover my breath as it followed up on its initial attack right after, dashing towards me as fast as it did before. But now, I was not just able to see its advance with my Sharingan eyes, my body was able to react accordingly as well thanks to Chakra Enhancement. I dashed forward as well, pulling out Kotetsu no Ryua with one hand while pulling on the chain that was still attached to the Dullahan with the other. The increase in my movement speed almost caught me off guard, but I couldn't let myself be disoriented with just that. I slid under the humongous sword swung by the undead while letting my blade slice into the creature's ankle. But that wasn't all. The reason I was pulling on the chain wasn't just to disturb its balance, I intended to tie up its movement. Getting up from my sliding position, I ran around the tall undead, wrapping the chains around its ankles, all the while using my enhanced vision and physical ability to evade any further attacks. However, the Dullahan was cognizant enough to see what I was trying to do and jumped out of the entangling spool of chains around its feet. Itsked in annoyance, but thanks to its momentary preoccupation with avoiding the chains, I was granted the opportunity to stab towards the severed head being held. My gambit succeeded as the tip of Kotetsu no Ryua was thrust into the head's cheeks for a moment before the Dullahan moved away from my range. Grah! The Dullahan's severed head roared in anger after it landed a distance away, incensed at the sheer audacity behind me intentionally targeting its very obvious weak spot. It braced itself and reappeared beside me in a burst of speed, not that I was not able to follow its movements and react accordingly. I blocked its attack with my katana, but the force behind the strike threw me back. The zombie rapidly chased after me, another swing of its Zanbato at the ready. I released Kotetsu no Ryu for just an instant to form the hand seal necessary for the clone technique, and upon landing created 5 illusionary duplicates that ran off in different directions. The undead lacked the necessary brain power to discern the real from the fakes, so it changed its trajectory to bisect the nearest clone, intending to discover the original via a process of elimination, one that would be extremely hazardous to my health if I let it succeed. While the Dullahan was the reanimated corpse of an Uchiha, I was assuming it lacked the clan's famed Daojutsu nor the intellect necessary to see through the very elementary trick. Nor could it see through the henge I had placed on myself upon creating the clones. Disguised as a piece of shattered tombstone on the ground, I rapidly formed the hand seals for the Great Fireball technique. I broke my own illusion when I breathed out the ball of fire, but this time I tried to minimize the CP used and condense the fireball as much as I could to solely target the severed head being carried around. I didn't need a large explosion, I needed a concentrated burst of firepower. The fireball accurately struck the severed head of the Dullahan, who was busy cutting down my clones, too busy to notice the fireball before it was too late. A small explosion occurred as my aim struck true. The Dullahan's head shrieked in pain, the first sign of an undead feeling any sort of sensation that I know of. There wasn't enough remnant chakra in the fireball for the head to stay lit on fire, but the scorch marks that and burnt hair of the severed head was enough evidence of the damage dealt. The Dullahan's face deformed in pure rage, and an unearthly screech was emitted out of its singed mouth, before the Dullahan ran towards the real me again. I smirked and repeated my previous tactic of creating a hand seal to create more clones. But this time it was different. The Dullahan actually threw its own severed head into the air. I widened my eyes in surprise as I watched this unexpected action, and when my sight landed on the severed head flying up, I locked eyes with the Dullahan that was glaring angrily at me, the real me, not the clones. I wanted to reach into my inventory to pull out some ranged weapons to target the thrown head, but the beheaded body reached me too quickly for me to do so. Now holding the Zanbato with both hands, it swung the oversized sword with greater speed and force than before. Once again, I wielded Kotetsu no Ryu, reinforced with chakra flow, to block the attack. But unlike the previous time, I was not ready for the sheer strength behind the swing. Instead of just throwing me back, I was launched more than twice the distance. At the moment of impact, my Sharingan eyes even caught my katana creaking and trembling, threatening to shatter under the might behind its slash. I flew back, and landed unceremoniously on my back, not even having the wherewithal to flip myself in midair to land properly. I tumbled briefly on the ground but managed to jump back up with an acrobatic one-handed flip. Turning back at the Dullahan, I saw it catch the head midair as it was falling. The severed head turned to me and snarled viciously. I took the brief respite to check my remaining CP. Around half had already been expended through the usage of multiple jutsus and the maintenance of Sharingan, chakra enhancement, and chakra flow, even though only 2 minutes had passed thus far. A quick calculation told me that even if I refrained from using any more chakra-heavy jutsus, namely the Grand Fireball technique, I could only sustain this level of combat for another 3 minutes or so at most. The Dullahan hefted up its Zanbato into another stance, its body coiled and tensed like a compressed spring ready to be released at a moment's notice. I unconsciously let out a breath at the suspense. My Sharingan eyes instantly scanned its stance, looking for any holes in its defense, weaknesses or other such shortcomings. Kill or be killed. I reminded myself as I too tensed my body and tightened my grip on the Kotetsu no Ryu. I wearily lifted up my tanto above my head and stabbed it down one last time with all the remaining stamina left in my worn-out body. The short sword dug into the severed head of the Dullahan, leaving behind an open wound that joined a dozen other puncture marks on the head. With one last dying gasp, the head that I had been crouching over and stabbing repeatedly and violently burst into a thick cloud of dark smoke along with the nearby dismembered and broken body of the Dullahan. Plus 2875 EXP. Through continuous training, you have gained +1 VIT. You have leveled up. Upon seeing the death of my ironically undead foe, I immediately collapsed on my back in both exhaustion and relief. My body was caked in blood, and my clothes were tattered almost beyond repair. They probably had a single-digit durability right now. The battle was short, but incredibly fast-paced. I came extremely close to a game over numerous times, and only the Sharingan, and sometimes Flash Step, was able to get me out of some dangerously close calls. In fact, if not for the chakra enhancement skill I just learned a couple minutes ago, I would have surely been beheaded or bisected multiple times over by the creature's Zanbato. A few notifications popped up, but I dismissed them. I needed just a moment's respite from the intensely draining fight I just won. My body may be invulnerable to receiving normal injuries, but fatigue was still a very real consequence of what I just went through. I was able to feel pain from the damage I take, but only momentarily. Even right now, with my body as cut up and bruised as it is, I could probably still continue fighting with little to no impact to my fighting ability, disregarding exhaustion that is, but that was something that could be remedied with a short rest. The fight was hard, extremely so. Multiple moments throughout the encounter I nearly died or was delimbed, and it was truly the most challenging, arduous, and horrifically desperate situation I had ever been in, but it was also equally as rewarding. Not the potentially generous item drops from the loot orb, but the entire experience itself was exhilarating. The sheer thrill of putting my life on the line, with every moment possibly being my last, and the nearly intoxicating feeling of putting together strategies and tactics in a fight and seeing them succeed. Something about pushing my mind and body to its limits, it was almost addictive. Even now, my heart was still pounding in my chest, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, my limbs restless and craving for the satisfying impact of flesh hitting flesh or the resistance from a blade carving into muscle and bone. I, who was once a billionaire playboy philanthropist, had once foolishly imagined there was nothing else in the world that could excite or astonish me. To think, thrusting myself into a life or death situation, risking my head in an extremely close encounter, would enrapture me so. I would have laughed if I had the energy left in me. I took a few minutes to calm my mind and settle my nerves, allowing my body to calm down from the adrenaline that was slowly receding from my veins, before sitting up and opening up my status to check my HP and CP. HP, 369/2700. CP, 420/4565. It was only a result of the HP and CP regeneration from the past few minutes that my HP and CP was in the 3 digits. I had taken quite a few hits and slashes from the hidden boss, none as damaging as the first direct hit I had received at the start of the fight that took nearly half my HP, but it was to the point where a light breeze could have claimed my life. And near the end of the fight my Sharingan, chakra flow, and chakra enhancement had been forcibly deactivated because I ran out of chakra to fuel the skills. Thankfully by then the fight was already at its finale, with the Dullahan's headless body being incapacitated and its severed head vulnerable. At a certain point in the fight, the Dullahan had amassed the remaining of its chakra to launch one final strong slash at me. I blocked it, but the heavy force of the Zanbato had blown Kotetsu no Ryua out of my hands, which forced me to retrieve the Wakizashi and Tanto from my inventory and assume a dual-wielding fighting style for the remainder of the fight. However, with the loss of the stat buffs from my katana, the fight became notably harder. Although, it had also correspondingly become easier too, since the Dullahan no longer had any more chakra to defend against attacks to its body with its chakra armor. So it did kind of balance out in the end. It was unfortunate, however, that I couldn't learn the chakra armor skill it was using with my Sharingan. It must have been some sort of innate ability rather than any type of jutsu. Which would explain why I couldn't replicate the technique with the Sharingan. After I sat up, I surveyed my surroundings. There were deep gashes in the earth from when the Dullahan was swinging around his sword that was clearly overcompensating for something. But one that was missing, which I had expected to be left behind, was the very same oversized Zanbato. Unfortunate, but realistically, it didn't exactly fit my aesthetic anyways. I brought back the notifications that had appeared upon defeating the hidden boss. Congratulations! You have eliminated the hidden boss. Plus 10 points. Plus 10,000 EXP. You may select a reward from the list below. Skill, Chakra Armor. Item, Buster Sword. Skill, Undying Rage. You may now exit the dungeon. Saying exit dungeon will allow you to leave. Otherwise, you will automatically be removed in 60 minutes. You have leveled up. My eyes widened from the rewards offered from defeating the hidden boss. 10 free stat points was the equivalent of leveling up twice. Add that I did indeed level up twice from the EXP I received from killing the Dullahan. It meant that I received 4 level up worth of stat points from the hidden boss. But what made my mouth truly water was the choice of rewards. The Buster Sword, which I assumed to be the Zanbato, was a weapon I did not really care for. It was too eye-catching, and even if the Myriad Armament Fiend would automatically adjust my proficiency in handling the weapon, it was still too ostentatious and unwieldy for my taste. So my choice naturally gravitated towards the Chakra Armor skill. Just from seeing how effective it was in prolonging the battle despite the Dullahan willingly tanking every attack aimed at its body, it made the skill very desirable. However, my hand paused when it was just about to select the skill as my reward. My Sharingan wasn't able to copy the Chakra Armor skill, but that didn't mean I would never be able to recreate the skill. I created Flash Step from scratch after all. Sure, I had the help of the gamer system that auto-corrected any errors or imperfections in the conception of the skill when it was created, but that would similarly apply in my efforts to recreate the Chakra Armor. Furthermore, needing the Chakra Armor in the first place would be a testament to my failure as a shinobi. A ninja was meant to be fast, unseen and precise. The complete antithesis of the Dullahan that just confidently stood there taking the hits. Plus, if I had the Chakra Armor as an assurance of protection, I would just become complacent and be less careful than I had to be. Which was just a bad habit to have. To be frank, I would have probably chosen the skill as my reward if not for the third option intriguing me so. What was Undying Rage supposed to represent? It was something I never heard of, and certainly not a jutsu that originated from the Naruverse. Weighing my options between something that I could potentially recreate given enough time and something entirely unknown but could possibly surpass Chakra Armor, my choice was clear. I chose the third option and a new notification appeared. Undying Rage has been added to your skill page. Undying Rage, active, LVL, 1. CP cost. Prevents your HP from falling below 1 HP for 5 seconds. The skill will automatically and can only be triggered when your HP reaches 1. The skill does not activate if the user receives damage exceeding max HP. So basically a skill that would prevent me from dying for 5 seconds. While I was glad I was able to acquire a skill that I would probably have never been able to create on my own, and an immensely useful one at that, I sincerely hoped I would never be in a situation where I had to use it. Next, I turned to the loot orb that had been left behind by the hidden boss. However, unlike the previous loot orbs that I encountered which were either glowing white or green, this had a shimmering purple hue to it. My jaw instantly dropped in the unexpected but extremely pleasant surprise. I stood up and immediately rushed to the glowing purple orb and grabbed it, afraid it would somehow disappear if I dawdled. Loot gained happy smiley. Plus 27,960 Rio. Ancient weapon fragment, 1/6, unique. Soldier's swift boots rare. Soldier's dog tags rare. Soldier's rations X10 uncommon. Ancient weapon fragment, 1/6, grade, unique. A fragment of an unknown ancient weapon. It is useless on its own, but when put together with the other fragments, an ancient weapon of legendary quality will be formed. Soldier's swift boots grade, rare. A pair of exceptionally well-made combat boots that belonged to a soldier. Durability, 50/50. DEX plus 5. Item skill, Whirlwind Steps, active. CP cost, 100 per minute. Increases your movement speed by 100% when activated. Soldier's dog tags grade, rare. a necklace with 2 dog tags attached. The tags are built to withstand explosions, as a result they are incredibly durable. Durability, 200/200. STR +5. VIT +5. DEX +5. Soldier's rations grade uncommon. A bar of densely packed carbohydrates, protein and fats. All the nutrients necessary to keep the busy soldier on the go. Eating one will satiate hunger for 48 hours. A weapon fragment, and 1 out of 6 at that. Initially, my first thoughts were along the lines of fragment. Fuck off. But then I remembered that the Uchiha Natural Dungeon had 6 difficulties to it, from F to a rank. And if the F-ranked hidden boss rewarded the first of 6 fragments, it would be plausible that the other hidden bosses of the remaining would also give the fragments as a reward. A weapon created from the fragments left behind by 6 hidden bosses. The notion was positively tantalizing. But that also meant that the prerequisite for acquiring such a weapon would be to clear every single hidden boss in the Uchiha Natural Dungeon. However, I would not let something like that impede my goal of obtaining all 6 fragments of the ancient weapon and craft the end product. I would have to be smart about it, however, as the hidden boss of the level 1, rank F dungeon had nearly killed me more than a few times. The subsequent dungeons which had higher level limits would only be substantially more challenging and dangerous. As much as I wanted to exit the rank F dungeon and immediately charge right into the rank E dungeon, it would be an unbelievably foolish endeavor. Even if I could defeat the boss, I would have no chance against the hidden boss. And since I only had 1 shot to clear each dungeon, I would not be able to kill the hidden boss and thus permanently lose out on the second ancient weapon fragment. Despite the fact that dungeons were incredibly lucrative both in terms of items and EXP, I would have to be patient and ensure I was thoroughly prepared and ready before diving into the next dungeon run. Upon receiving the 2 rare items, I wanted to immediately equip them but held off on it. My current footwear, which was the rogue's sandals, were adequate, but ultimately not very useful unless I needed to be sneaky or if I was able to acquire the 3rd of the set to achieve its set effect. The soldier's boots were way better with bonus stat buffs and the item skill effect, which I predicted would be absolutely staggering if whirlwind steps was amplified by chakra enhancement. However, the vanity within me refused to pair combat boots with the shorts I was currently wearing. It would be a travesty to behold and a veritable crime against fashion. Even if I was just a 9-year-old child, the socialite side of me from my previous life still would not acquiesce to such a compromise. The dog tags, on the other hand, while tacky, did not interfere with my fashion sense and could be hidden under my shirt, so I equipped it. Speaking of the clothes I was currently wearing, they were in tatters after the tough fight I just went through. Luckily, I brought spares in my inventory which I changed into. Unfortunately, however, the rogue's hoodie I was wearing during the fight was nearly shredded, and a quick check at my inventory showed that it was currently hanging on by a thread with 4/30 durability. Unless I could find a tailor or seamstress to mend the hoodie that was now more an amalgamation of torn rags than jacket, I would have to leave it in the inventory indefinitely. After changing, I sat down in a cross-legged position and started meditating. I had an hour to rest up before exiting the dungeon, which would be 20 minutes in the outside world, so I might as well take advantage of the time difference and recuperate before leaving. Exit dungeon, I declared, and the illusion barrier around me shattered in the same fashion as when I had first entered the dungeon. The previously dark area was once again bathed in light. I quickly blinked away the spots in my vision as a result of the sudden illumination from the sun's rays. I had spent roughly 15 hours in the dungeon, which meant only 5 hours had passed since I entered, so it was still evening in the real world. I found myself at the exact spot where I had exited the dungeon, the entrance of the Uchiha clan cemetery. I had wondered what it would look like to a third party when I entered or exited a dungeon. Would it appear as though I simply vanished and reappeared into thin air, or something else entirely? It wasn't something I could test out without another person's aid, unless I learned the shadow clone technique and let it observe me entering into a dungeon before dismissing it and gaining the memories. I first checked my immediate surroundings, just to make sure there was nobody around that had witnessed me appearing out of nowhere. From the looks of it, at least as far as I could tell, I was the only person in the area. However, just as I was about to walk away and leave the Uchiha clan compound before someone came across me, I heard a quiet but discernible of a child's weeping. I turned my head towards the source of the cry, which I located to be within the Uchiha clan cemetery. I tilted my head. There shouldn't be anyone in the Uchiha clan compound, and especially not the cemetery, except for the sole remaining Uchiha clan member aside from me. Curious, I looked into the cemetery and spotted a young child sitting and sobbing softly in front of two tombstones that rested side by side. The child's hairstyle, even from just looking at the back of his head, was instantly recognizable. It was Sasuke, sitting and crying in front of what I assumed to be his parents' grave. Sighing at the pitiful sight, I took a step forward, hesitating slightly, before I continued to make my way towards the boy. I walked forwards, as quietly as I could, trying not to be intrusive. The Uchiha still hadn't noticed me by the time I was nearly next to him. I paused for a moment, waiting for him to notice my presence, but he still has his attention on his parents' headstones. Silently, I sat down next to him, which finally got his attention. Sasuke flinched at my sudden appearance and almost jumped away, but upon recognizing me, quickly wiped away the tears and snot from his face. "Why are you here?" he asked, with some hostility and what I surmised to be surprise and displeasure at my intrusion into his clan's compound, and more importantly my intrusion into what was a private moment between him and his parents. I glanced at him for a moment before turning back to his parents' headstones. "Forgive me, I was looking for you to have a talk, but I couldn't find you. So I tried looking in the clan compound. Honestly though, I also wanted to see for myself the place where one or both of my parents lived, the place where I might have grown up in had I not been. I don't know, I thought maybe I would find some closure or something. Then I saw you and heard you crying and, well, I just thought, I don't know, I just thought maybe you shouldn't be alone, or you needed a friend." Sasuke's scowl softened, before he turned away and wiped away the last of the tear stains on his cheeks. I wasn't crying. And I definitely don't need a friend," he declared stubbornly. "What a tsund. One that was 0% cute though." I looked back at him briefly but turned back to the headstones. "It's okay to cry. And it's okay to need a friend." At my words, the Uchiha stood up and glared down at me. "I don't need a friend. What I need is strength. Enough to kill Itachi. Enough to make him pay for what he has done. And until that day, it will never be okay to cry. Only then can I have the right to feel anything but anger." I looked up at him, my expression impassive. He was loud, but his tone did not reflect the rage he clearly held against his brother. His tone revealed the scars etched in his heart, the pain, the loneliness, the sorrow and the excruciating agony he was living through day after day. To the point where he was torturing himself every moment with his self-imposed duty to kill his brother and exact vengeance. A psychologist would classify his self-destructive behavior to be survivor's guilt, blaming oneself for being alive while everyone else around them was dead. He faulted himself for not doing more to save his clan, and condemned himself for being alive, thus taking on the responsibility to avenge his clan as a form of making amends or atonement. All right, you weren't crying," I responded, as though placating a child, which I suppose I technically was. "Let's just sit here in silence then, not crying and not as friends. How about that?" "You. HMPH, I don't feel like it anymore. How long are you planning on staying here?" "I'm not sure." "Why don't you sit down with me and find out, I asked teasingly, but he didn't seem particularly keen on trading jokes. Sasuke started walking away. "TSK, I don't have time to waste on you. I have to train. You show yourself out once you're done with your foolishness. Do you think your parents would want you to live like that? Never being happy again, and wallowing in your hatred?" I called out after him, still seated on the ground and looking at Fugaku and Mikoto's tombstone. Sasuke looked taken aback, but quickly gritted his teeth. He turned back, reached down and grabbed my collar. "You know nothing. How could you, an orphan, know anything about what any parent would want?" He screamed out but winced right after, and to his credit looked slightly guilty for bringing up what he thought was my tragic backstory. "Yeah, you're right. An orphan like me wouldn't know what your parents would want," I blandly responded, making Sasuke flinch, but his grip on the front of my shirt nonetheless did not loosen. "But what I do know about is living with the hand fate has dealt you, making the best of a shit situation and not giving in to despair." Sasuke's glare returned and opened his mouth to refute, but I gripped his wrist and continued, "I may not have had parents before, but I still have people I care about. People like Kaori. And I know that if anything happened to me, I wouldn't want her to wallow about in her self-pity. No, I would want her to be happy, to continue on living even if that meant forgetting about me." The Uchiha clenched his fist and his grip on my shirt tightened and he twisted it further. You want me to forget my parents? Forget about Itachi? Impossible. I'm the last Uchiha. It is my responsibility to never forget about the clan, it is my duty to hunt down the traitor, and it is my purpose to kill him. I'm not saying you should forget about your parents or forgive what your brother has done to your clan. And I told you before, no matter what you say, I will be right with you the day we cut him down. What I am trying to say is, if you keep going on like this, you will never be able to do it. What are you even talking about? Don't underestimate my resolve, you bastard." Sighing, I pulled his hand away from my shirt, using my other hand to smooth out the creases. "I'm not underestimating your resolve. But really think about it, how strong was Itachi when he was your age? Your brother, Itachi, I heard some things about him. When he was 6, he graduated the Shinobi Academy and became a genin. When he was 10, he passed the Chunin exams. A year after that he joined the Anbu, and it took him only another year to be promoted to Anbu captain. Which meant that he was at the very least Jounin level by then." Sasuke bared his teeth. I know all that. What is your point? How old are you? 8, 9. When Itachi was your age, he was probably already doing life or death missions and had his skills tempered and refined through battles. You're still in the Shinobi Academy, playing ninja with children. His eyes trembled at the comparison. I said I know already. Why else do you think I am working towards? That's why I need hatred, I need power, to catch up that bastard and kill him. Then I will bring his head back here and present it my to San and Ka-san. Then. Tears slipped out of his eyes, but he was too focused on his parents' headstones to notice. And what do you think he's doing out there? Sleeping away his days, waiting for you to become stronger and come kill him. No, he is getting stronger too, in preparation for the day you eventually show up to take his head. So then the question comes down to whether you can catch up his growth and even surpass the genius of the Uchiha clan who became an Anbu captain at 12 years of age. Sasuke stared into the distance for a few silent moments before whipping his head up and screamed, "Gra!" He collapsed to his knees and punched the ground repeatedly. "Kaso. I know. I know he is stronger than me, I know that. Then what else am I supposed to do? All I can do right now is become stronger as fast as I can, no matter what I have to do. I have to do it. To-san, Ka-san, I swear, I will definitely kill him. I will kill Itachi and bring his head to you. Until that day, I will never rest." Gra! Still seated next to the sobbing and raging boy, I sighed deeply. Sasuke wasn't even talking to me anymore, he was addressing his parents. And from the looks of it, Itachi really did a number on the kid. "Sasuke. Oi Sasuke. Look at yourself now, do you think being like this now is going to solve anything?" I called out. "Shut up. I am the last Uchiha. I am an avenger. I only have one purpose, and that is to exact vengeance." Sasuke responded, still facing down with his fist clenched and digging into the dirt of his parents' grave. "This crazy bastard. You keep saying that you're the last Uchiha, but don't forget, I am an Uchiha too, am I not?" Sasuke froze and slowly turned towards me but remained silent, tears furiously streaming down his face. "Listen, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Similarly, when you're an avenger, all you can think about is revenge. But have you thought about it this way? Who you are right now, and what you are doing, aren't you just dancing to your brother's tune?" What are you saying? You said the reason why he spared you was just to toy with you, and as a result you have delved into training and obsessing over revenge. He wants you to train because he knows full well that your obsession will only hinder your growth. Hatred doesn't breed strength, it is only a weakness to be exploited. When you are driven by rage, blind to everything and everyone else around you, then wouldn't you make an easy target? I explained, folding my arms together. Sasuke was shocked into silence and thought through my words. I continued, "I admit that there's no way I can relate to what you've went through, probably no one in the world could. So I know I have no right to say to you one of those bullshit, living well is the best revenge lines that means nothing to someone like you. But as an Uchiha, albeit unofficial, I also feel it my place to give you some advice. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. If you want to succeed, if we want to succeed in our vengeance, then we have to be patient. Patient. Yes, patient. Slowly and methodically build our strength, gather reliable comrades, conduct reconnaissance, plan an ambush, wait for an opportunity. And one day, when the stars are aligned and all factors point to our success, we strike. In one brutally quick, efficient and deadly stroke, we cut him down before he even has a chance to react." "No, wait, that would be too easy. I want to have to know why he did it. I want to hear it from his own mouth, why he killed our clan. Otherwise, I will never be able to let it go." Sasuke refuted. "Ha! What is your goal here, to kill your brother or to have a grand little tea time over cakes and biscuits. Listen, 1,000 things could go wrong in an operation, and that's after careful planning and strategizing. Going in half-cocked, demanding answers, that's just being complacent and arrogant. It's not just his death I want. I need to know why. And I want him to beg for his life. The Uchiha declared before narrowing his eyes at me, "It doesn't matter what you think, that's the plan, and if I have to do it alone, so be it." I rolled my eyes at his knifed, even cannon Sasuke gathered allies to form his Team Hawk. He was too young and too ignorant to realize that now, but that was something he would eventually figure out once he was older. However, it was something I could remedy now. Aha, and how much do you want to bet that Itachi won't be alone when you do find him? Missing nin like him tend to stick together. Makes sense if you think about it, safety in numbers and all that. Sasuke raised an eyebrow at that, clearly he had never considered the possibility before. I continued, and say hypothetically you are as strong as Itachi. Fine. Then what if you had to fight 2 enemies at the same time? 3. Or 4. All of them on the same level as your brother. What then? What if in a moment of distraction he escapes, and is now wary of his little brother so he never resurfaces again? Going in alone without proper planning leaves too much unaccounted for, and that's just a recipe for disaster. I paused, letting Sasuke absorb what I've said so far. Do you understand now? I prompted. I think so. Gather allies, make a plan, wait for an opportunity and ambush, right? But instead of killing him from the get-go, we could just trap him. Tie him up or something. Make him talk. I groaned internally. Again, that left way too much up to chance. What if Itachi used Susanoo? Or even Izanagi? I mean, he wouldn't, since the man actually wanted Sasuke to kill him as penance for his deeds. But the more pertinent matter was that I didn't want Sasuke to learn the truth of the Uchiha clan's downfall. Sasuke was unpredictable, emotionally unstable and mentally damaged. He wanted to destroy Konoha once he learned the truth. Shit like that was just counterproductive in dealing with the true enemy. If that's your final compromise, then I won't say much else. But more importantly, do you now understand when I say you need to have patience and not drown yourself in hatred and vengeance? Sasuke frowned slightly, but at least it was a far cry from the look of anguish and despair that had been on his face a minute ago. We're in agreement then. And I understand where you're coming from, but it's not something I can just give up overnight. I understand, cousin. Our eyes met and I could tell he was shocked at how I addressed him. He froze for a moment but relaxed his expression and there was even a hint of a smile. Cousin, sounds foreign to me after so long. You'll get used to it, cousin. We shared a moment of comfortable silence as he shifted and sat down next to me, both of us just basking in the shared familial comfort. Sasuke slowly turned towards me. Well then, what now? I returned the look. What now? Step 1 of the weasel hunt, train. We will help each other become stronger, we will share our knowledge and our expertise. But first, I will help you unlock your Sharingan. It shouldn't be difficult. In truth, Sasuke already awakened his Sharingan on the night of the massacre, just that the trauma of the experience repressed the memory. He only rediscovered it years later when fighting Haku in the Land of Waves. If put in a similarly stressful situation, he would be able to reawaken it years earlier. Sasuke was taken aback by my declaration but nodded with determination. Yeah, only a Sharingan can deal with another Sharingan. I will need those eyes to face him. Once again we settled into comfortable silence with Sasuke gazing affectionately but with somber undertones at his parents' gravestones. But I had one more bomb to drop. Or rather, one more seed to plant. It was appearing more likely that no matter what I did or how I intervened, Sasuke would one day find out the truth behind the Uchiha massacre. And if that was the case, it would be better for me to start easing him into that realization, slowly and with me to help him process the information in the right manner, one that would not lead him to hate Konoha and seek her destruction. Hey Sasuke, just out of curiosity, but how did Itachi kill your clan? Sasuke seemed to have been shaken from his stupor by my question. What do you mean? Well, pardon me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it kind of weird that for some reason the entire Uchiha clan was present that night? I mean, was no Uchiha shinobi sent on missions or no military police patrolling the village? Was there some sort of an event or festival going on? Sasuke looked confused at the question, never really considering something like that before. I'm not sure. Maybe there was a clan meeting, but, well, it doesn't matter, I suppose. I shrugged away his nonchalance. The seed of doubt was planted, and over the years I would just need to water it with similar questions and cultivate it with discoveries to slowly ease him into the eventual discovery of the clan's plot to overthrow Konoha. A few days after I cleared the rank F dungeon, I took a moment to take stock of my stats, skills and items. Over the past year I had been steadily accumulating the free stat points I acquired through level ups, quest rewards or other sources. As a result of my frugal saving, I was able to stockpile 93 free stat points. However, those efforts weren't for nothing, they were for the purposes of increasing training efficiency. The theory was that the higher my stats, the longer I had to train to raise any single stat point. Thus, by withholding the free stat points, the speed of stat training would not be compromised. At least in theory, that is. I wasn't some mathematician that had a mental Excel sheet in my mind tracking every stat increase and the gap between each one. It might seem irresponsible, but I was mostly going at it without much forethought. Furthermore, I also thought it effective to maintain the facade of a normal academy student by not doubling my physical prowess out of the blue. Wasn't there a saying that went something like, "One must first fool your friends"? If I was ever in a dire straits, having those emergency stat points as a trump card might just be the key to survival. Even though I was uncomfortable looking at my uneven stats such as my STR and DEX, which were just a hair away from reaching 50 that would net me 2 new perks, I still had a couple years until graduation, so I definitely still had time to organically improve them. Next, on the subject of my items. I was having trouble deciding what I was going to do with the mountain of miscellaneous item drops I received from the zombies in the dungeon. There were over 100 of them, and they were a diverse variety consisting of lighters, nail clippers, rubber bands and dozens others. My inventory space had an unlimited space, as far as I knew, but it was literally tedious sorting through these items whenever I needed to retrieve something in particular. The items seemed almost brand new. Most of them had little to no visible signs of wear and tear, so I kept the few that I would need around the house. But an overwhelming majority were useless to me. I definitely had no use for 30 different types of water bottles. Initially I wanted to just leave them in the Konoha rubbish dump, since I had no real use for a vast majority of the items. However, on my way to said dump, I actually encountered something called a thrift shop that was advertising that they were buying and selling used goods. The existence of such a shop was baffling in and of itself. Why would anyone want to buy second-hand goods when they could just get brand new ones? I supposed it might have been some sort of peasant joke that I was too rich to understand, but I didn't question it because when in Rome and all that. Of course I couldn't just walk in and start dumping stuff out of my inventory onto the counter, so I used a trolley and some garbage bags to transport the items from my home to the shop. I managed to sell off around half of the ordinary loot I received, which totaled up to just under 10,000 Rio. Some of them were worth more money like jewelry or electronics, but most were sold for just chump change. The rogue's hoodie that I was wearing in my fight with the hidden boss but had been tattered beyond belief was brought to a tailor for repairs. The tailor had taken one look at the loose shreds of cloth and straightaway advised me to toss them in the trash, saying that it would be less costly to just buy a new jacket altogether. However, given that the item description showed that it was still barely hanging on with 3 points of durability remaining, which meant the item effects were still intact. Add to that my inherent loot hoarding tendencies, I really did not want to lose an uncommon grade item, especially one that was part of an item set. Since I was worried about how the whole ship of Theseus thought experiment might apply to a jacket, at which point would the repaired jacket no longer be identified as the original jacket, so I firmly requested the tailor to fix it rather than to replace it, and even emphasized the importance of not damaging the current article of clothing further than it already was. The end product was a gnarly-looking jacket with frayed seams and distinctive stitches across all the once torn openings. Its initial nondescript, plain style was relished with an ostentatiously macabre appearance. The item effects still remained, however the maximum durability of the rogue's hoodie had been reduced to 21 instead of the original 30. A satisfactory compromise, I supposed. I also conducted a little experiment with the Berserker's eye patch, the one that reduced all my stats by half if I wore it. See, I had been curious if the artificial reduction my stats would enable to take advantage of the increased rate of stat growth due to the aforementioned lowered stats. Long story short, it did. But there were still some limitations, however. For example, halving my int stat also meant significantly reducing my CP reserve and CP regeneration. As such, it also reduced the amount of time I could train chakra-related skills. Secondly, training outside while wearing the eye patch just looked plain weird, and I wasn't inclined to look like an attention-seeking brat wearing an eye patch just to draw attention. Despite these limitations, training with the eye patch was still extremely effective if done so in the privacy of my own home where no judgmental gazes would befall me. Coupled with the bodybuilder's dumbbells I acquired from the Kinaku Baker boss, my STR stat training was doubly effective. I was also curious about the effects of items on regular people that was not part of the gamer system. For example, would the eye patch reduce anyone's stats by 50%, or was it just me? So during one day I had pulled out the Berserker's eye patch and showed it to my friends, claiming that it was something I had found on the floor. My intention was to see if its effects would kick in if someone other than me were to wear it. If its effects did activate, that would mean items I received from dungeons, or more accurately, items I received from the gamer system also applied to other people. And that would open up a whole can of worms that I did not even want to deal with at the moment. When I showed my friends the eye patch, talking about how cool it was and how cool it would be for someone to wear it, Naruto voluntarily, demanded to try it on. Before he put on the Berserker's eye patch, I used observe to check his status so I could see if there was any effect on his HP and CP, since lowered VIT and INT would correspondingly lower those parameters. Fortunately for my sanity, there seemed to be no change to Naruto's HP and CP before and after he put on the eye patch. When I asked if he felt any different upon wearing the eye patch, the boy simply and loudly proclaimed that he was going to one day become the Pirate King, to everyone's chagrin. After entertaining his childishness for some time, I asked for the eye patch back since I still needed it for training. Naruto was reluctant, but despite his poor upbringing he was no thief nor was he someone who would take what did not belong to him, so he grudgingly gave back the eye patch. My little experiment showed that the gamer system only had a bearing on myself unless the other individual was involved in some manner, like being invited to my party if such a party system existed. Of course, that was something I would definitely not be interested in sharing, especially during the academy years since children had notoriously loose lips. It wouldn't take a genius to realize the domino effect that would take place and ultimately lead me under a scientist's scalpel or other such dire consequences. The reason why I was organizing myself in such a way was because my last experience in a dungeon was admittedly harrowing and served as a warning. I was truly intending on conquering the Uchiha Natural Dungeon. I had to prepare myself thoroughly before entering, especially since the dungeons and consequently its hidden bosses were only going to get harder and harder from here on out. Any carelessness or recklessness would only see my HP drop to 0, and that was something I was not interested in ever experiencing. Neither did I want to experience again the feeling of being outclassed so thoroughly, not just by hidden bosses, but by any of my future opponents. Sure, it was thrilling and exhilarating to put my life on the line in a close but intense fight, trading blows and allowing instinct to take over. But it was also foolish to even be partaking in such an even fight to begin with. What I said to Sasuke a few days prior also resonated with myself: methodically build my strength, making ample preparations, investigate and scrutinize any potential conflict, and most importantly to be patient and wait for opportunities. I needed to temper my anticipation to grind EXP and items in a dungeon. Being foolhardy would only squander the opportunity I received. Welcome back. The group chorused while the girl who was the sole target of our attention blushed heavily under our combined gazes. Today was the day Kaori returned back to the academy and our little, or not so little anymore, group of friends decided to throw a small party to welcome her back. The standard Rookie 9 group was present, except for Sasuke of course. Even though the frostiness in him had warmed up slightly after our talk and his revelation of another living Uchiha, he still treated anyone other than me with some hostility. When I invited him to join us for the celebration, he only took a moment before saying no. But at the very least it was an improvement to how he would have responded before, which would have been an instant and aggressive fuck off. Aside from the usual few, there were a few other of our classmates who joined our little gathering. They were some of the civilian students Kaori was close with, so I didn't particularly mind their presence. The party was actually planned by, unsurprisingly, Ino, after I informed her a day before that Kaori was intending to return to the Shinobi Academy today. Unsurprising because Ino was always the one who resembled my past self the most, always the socialite who gathered friends and formed cliques. As such, planning a party, any sort of party, was right down her alley. And also because I knew that her childish rivalry with Kaori over my affections held no malice whatsoever. It was a friendly, albeit stupid, competition that I guaranteed would not last long. They probably weren't going to be best friends anytime soon, or at all. They had a mismatch of personalities since Kaori was too meek when it came to anything other than me, and Ino was someone who sought popularity over genuinity. But still, there was an amicable friendship between them under the disguise of a rivalry. Shino was someone who I wouldn't peg as a person who would voluntarily participate in parties, but seeing that he took an active role in helping free Kaori from her tormentors, it made sense he would want to be present to welcome her back. Thank you, glad to be back. Kaori shyly sputtered out. There was an awkward pause following her reply, the rest not really knowing how to react or what to do next. Sensing the uncomfortable silence, I quickly took charge of the awkward situation. Sorry we didn't prepare much, I think some of us just bought some stuff from the store or home, I mentioned while gesturing to the table of food stuff. We were gathered around one of the tables in the Shinobi Academy cafeteria, and the small party was taking place during lunchtime. There were some traditional Japanese snacks like dango and mochi, but also some actual food stuff like rice balls, bento boxes and a conspicuously large bowl of takeaway ramen. Some was bought prior to the party at a local convenience store or brought from home. I personally prepared one of the bento boxes displayed. My cooking was something I was particularly proud of. It was not a skill that was granted by the gamer system which could easily be leveled up after some time. No, it was an art form which took real blood and sweat to improve. Hundreds of trial and error, nicking my fingers when dicing produce, scalding myself on hot cookware. After all that, I couldn't help but be proud of my success in the culinary arts. It wasn't a skill I intended to hide either, like my gamer abilities which I was forced to conceal. Rather, I intended on displaying my results. Thus, in preparation for the potluck gathering we were holding for Kaori, I cooked up a veritable feast for my customers. I woke up at the break of dawn and headed to the wet markets so that I could secure the freshest and best quality produce. Following which, I spent the next few hours before school to make some of the dishes I was most proficient in. Unlike the foods that were most prominent in this world, which was more along the lines of Japanese cuisine, I made Western dishes that I was more familiar with. Seared scallops, roasted cauliflower, aglio olio spaghetti and grilled lamb shank. All of them seasoned to perfection. Kaori bashfully replied, "You guys didn't have to do all this. I'm just glad to be back." "Nonsense," I declared, "there's no way we wouldn't celebrate your return, right guys?" The rest mutedly agreed, but Kiba cut in loudly, "Of course." Sakura approached Kaori and looked her up and down as if checking on her injuries. "How did you hurt yourself training? Are you feeling better?" Hinata and Shikamaru exchanged looks, but Shino and I did not betray our thoughts. The official story that was shared with our classmates was that Kaori had injured herself while training, and as a result was bedridden for the past 2 weeks. The other kids who were coincidentally expelled the day she got injured. Totally unrelated. The true story was covered up by Kaori's request. She didn't want the whole school to know that she was the victim of bullying, nor the fact that she was partially responsible for the expulsion of 7 students whose friends might not take kindly to that. The administration respected her wishes and informed the involved parties, who keep it on the down low. "Ah, you know how careless I can be here." Kaori lied, more convincing than I thought she would be, but it would have probably been fine regardless. The only one who might have been sharp enough to notice the connection between the expulsion and Kaori's absence from school, which was Shikamaru, was directly involved in the incident and was thus in the loop, so to speak. The other children were, well, children. Shinobi in training they might be, looking underneath the underneath was not yet a skill in their repertoire. "How are you feeling now? Still injured?" Sakura asked with some genuine concern. Kaori paused for a moment before responding, "No, not 100% yet, but I thought I would get better faster if I returned to the academy." Choji, who was salivating at the food, briefly glanced at the girl before asking, "You should stay home longer if you're still hurting." I subtly shook my head at his query. It wasn't physical damage she was recuperating from, that she recovered completely a week ago. Rather, it was the mental trauma inflicted upon her fragile and young psyche that was troubling her. She wasn't going to get better anytime soon if she just cooped herself up in her room and drowned in the loneliness and despair. Socializing with children her age and being amongst friends would serve Kaori much better. Well, I was just bored staying at home, I suppose. The girl slowly answered. From the corner of my eye I saw Shikamaru's eyebrow raised just 0.5 millimeter at her words, but he just lazily looked away. If I were you, I would have stayed home for another month. Nope, 3 months. Wait, a year would be perfect. He murmured under his breath quietly but was apparently heard by his loud blonde friend. Ino smacked Shikamaru's back, her eyebrow twitching. What's wrong with you? Can't you say welcome back like a normal person? That's so mean. Ouch, what's wrong with you? The lazy Nara demanded while shifting away from his violent friend. You just said you would have preferred if Kaori stayed home for another year. Ino practically screamed at him, while everyone just looked on in horror at what he meant. Ha! Where did you get that from? All I meant was if I were in her shoes, I would want to stay home as long as I could, you violent girl. Ino widened her eyes and covered her mouth abashedly. Oh, well, oops. But still, you could have been more compassionate. Shikamaru rolled his eyes and just dug his ear with his pink lazily while looking away. Kaori hurriedly came to the Nara's defense. No, I'm sure Shikamaru-kun meant well. He's nice. Ino looked back at the girl curiously. Shikamaru-kun. Nice. She narrowed her eyes in suspicion. Why the sudden familiarity, Is there something going on? Kaori blanched back in incredulity. No way. That's impossible. The Yamanaka hummed in response but continued pushing. Then why so defensive? Do you have something to hide? She asked while prodding at Kaori with a finger. The orphan merely waved her hands out in front of her. I'm not being defensive, you're the one. The boy in question just blankly glanced at the scene and muttered, troublesome, under his breath while the rest watched on with some amusement. No, can we start eating? I'm starving. Choji asked while eyeing the food hungrily as his stomach growled lightly. I smiled and patted him on the back, genuinely happy he was so excited to try my cooking. Well, that's up to today's main character, Kaori. The girl perked up at my mentioning of her name. Please go ahead. Yahoo! The rowdier boys, namely Naruto and Kiba, cheered and started digging into the assembled foods. Delicious! Naruto yelled out while slurping down a mouthful of ramen. I narrowed my eyes at him. What was the point of the potluck if he was just going to eat the ramen he brought? At least try my food, you brat. I looked around at the children who were all picking bits and pieces from every dish onto their own plates. I was more interested in seeing the reactions from people who ate my cooking rather than eating myself. However, to my dismay, it seemed like everyone was partaking in every other dish other than mine. A feeling of dread, doubt and anxiousness overtook my psyche for a moment. What was this feeling? Was I under some kind of mental attack? A genjutsu perhaps? But as I continued watching the children hungrily devouring the food on their plates that contained none of mine, the uneasiness and sheer distress simply grew deeper and larger. It didn't even seem like the gamer's mind was doing anything to combat that apprehension within me. What in the world was going on? The motley assortment of dreadful emotions coalesced into something I had never felt before, and it threatened to bubble over until I saw her Kaori, who scooped up nearly half of the food I made onto her plate without hesitation. The girl looked up and saw me staring at her before blushing slightly. I took too much, didn't I? Sorry, I just love your cooking so much. The bunched up knots of anxiety washed away upon seeing at least one person picking my dish. Was that what all those feelings were about? A sense of insecurity and inferiority. Well, I supposed that made some sense since my cooking was the only thing that I actively took pride in. And seeing the indifference of these brats, these Philistines, these ignoramuses was simply an attack on my person. Ha, insecurity and inferiority. I guess that was truly something I had never experienced before. How novel. Kiba overheard Kaori's words and chimed in, you like Shinji's cooking? I don't know, it always tasted kind of strange to me. Too heavy. My eyes narrowed in cold fury. Oi Kiba. Want to spar? The Inuzuka recoiled at that. It wasn't the first time the dog boy expressed his distaste over the food I made, and it wasn't the first time we sparred after such comments were made. The Inuzuka heir was boisterous, and more often than not saw himself as the alpha of the class, however unearned such a perception was. But he knew that there was one line I allowed no one to cross, the reverse scale no one was allowed to touch, and that was my cooking. Wait, Shinji, I meant strange as in, strangely good. He hurriedly explained himself and moved towards the bento box I prepared and started shoving the pasta on his plate. I smiled. Eat slowly, or you might get indigestion. Kiba audibly gulped. Turning away from the Inuzuka, I approached Kaori and quietly asked, how are you feeling really? Kaori swallowed down the mouthful of grilled lamb and replied with some apprehension. I'm better. I eyed her doubtfully, you know you don't have to push yourself too hard. You can take your time before coming back. There's no pressure. She shook her head, no, I need this. I was going to go crazy if I stayed home any longer. Nodding, I smiled and touched her arm, all right then, you know yourself best. Let me know if you need anything. Kaori brightened up at my words, but before she could respond, one of the civilian-born friends came over and pulled her away, demanding she tried some dish or another. It was somewhat heartwarming to see that she had other friends other than just me. I couldn't and didn't want to always be there for her, so it was good she would have other sources of comfort should I be unavailable. Sasuke jumps back and flings 3 shuriken at me. Real ones. Not blunted training weapons, but sharp steel designed to take flesh and blood. I duck underneath 2 and narrowly lean away from the last one. Energy flowed through my chakra pathway system, invigorating my muscles, allowing me to dash towards the Uchiha faster than he could react. A power strike, enhanced fist finds its way rocketing towards Sasuke. He attempts to block it, but the speed of the punch was fast enough to snake through his guard and bury itself in his gut. The boy flies away but manages to catch himself in midair and land safely, albeit unceremoniously. I remove the wakizashi that was sheathed diagonally across my back and hold it up threateningly, my Sharingan eyes burning a hole through the other Uchiha's eyes. Sasuke nurses the area where I punched him, his breaths getting more and more labored. I might have cracked a rib with the last strike. Already, there were bruises forming on his face, and a cut had opened up near his hairlines that was pouring blood. It wasn't a serious injury, but because there are many blood vessels concentrated around our scalp, head injuries bleed a lot. The blood flowed down and stained the right side of his face, the liquid getting into his eye and making the hard fight even more challenging with blurred vision from half his sight. His repertoire of skills was too limited to face me, who has aces in spades and trump card upon trump card. Exhausted of chakra, he could only fall back to using conventional weaponry and taijutsu, both of which was useless against the Uchiha clan's bloodline limit. Without a word, I quickly advanced, the Wakizashi poised to cut him down. I could see the panic in his eyes as he reached back to his pouch to pull out a kunai. It was a futile resistance, both of us knew it, but at least he was still trying to fight back. He fished out another handful of shuriken and threw them at me, but I struck them down with ease. Leaning forward, I rocketed forward in a burst of speed and reached my opponent. He was within slashing distance. I cut down with my blade, and he narrowly avoids the first, then the second, and the third. He attempts a counter with his kunai, but I casually knock away his wrist with the pommel of my blade. However, cutting me with his kunai was not his true intention. No, it was just a distraction as he allows the momentum of my deflection to let him shift to the side and attempt to drive the kunai he was hiding in his other hand into my sides. Keyword here being attempt. My Sharingan eyes spinning wildly captured every single detail of his plan, the micro-expressions on his face, his eyes revealing where his true target resided and the slightest twitches of his muscles. All of which revealed his objective as clearly as though I was reading a book. Indifferently, I snapped a kick towards him that landed square on his sternum. This time it wasn't laced with chakra enhancement, nor power strike, otherwise his ribcage might have caved in. I still needed him alive for my purposes. The kick saw him soaring back before landing and rolling into a bruised and battered pile of flesh. I approached the downed Uchiha calmly and looked down on his face. He was still conscious, but it appeared that he was no longer capable of continuing. Or so it seemed. I could tell, with the help of my Sharingan, that he was merely playing possum waiting for me to drop my guard so he could get the drop on me. I was not fooled, and he should have known that by now. Regardless, upon sensing me loosening the tension from my body, he struck. From his resting position, he lunged at me, with surprising agility, and tried carving into my gut with the one remaining kunai still in his grip. Too bad for him, however, I already anticipated his move and simply slapped away the weapon before kneeing him in the body. The last hit finally saw him slump in pain with the wind knocked out of him. As he kneeled, gasping in pain and for breath, he froze when he sensed the cold edge of my wakizashi against his neck. Yield. Sasuke closed his eyes in resignation and nodded in affirmation. At his surrender, a grin broke out of me and I sheathed the wakizashi. Squatting down to look at him on eye level, I placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll get it next time. Sasuke looked back at me and grunted a response before shifting from his kneeling position and sat on the ground. Damn it, why is this so hard? He asked while massaging the area I had been repeatedly striking. You knew this going in that it was going to be difficult. There's really no other way but to keep at it. Just be patient. It's already in you, so it's just a matter of time. I replied in consolation as I joined him in sitting. Sasuke frowned at me. You keep saying that, but so far all I've been doing is letting you kick my ass. I tilted my head at that. Okay, first off, you're not letting me do anything. I'm just that good. Secondly, I have told you my theory. Have you already forgotten it? Did I hit your head too hard? The boy sighed in frustration. I know. The Sharingan is awakened when an Uchiha experiences a powerful emotional condition. And your theory is that on the day of the massacre, you already awakened the Sharingan. There's no way you wouldn't have given that you experienced such a tragedy. It is likely that because you went through such a traumatic incident, your brain subconsciously suppressed the memory of your acquisition of those eyes. And so, unless you wish to experience a similar emotional devastation, the best way to trigger, or rather, reawaken those eyes is through intense battles bordering on life and death situations. Still seems like you just want to kick my ass though. Sasuke grumbled under his breath. I smiled. Well, that's half true. Even if my theory is wrong, unlikely, but suppose it is. Sparring like this with no holds barred will only improve our instincts and provide us valuable experience fighting with your life on the line. Which is why I insisted you attack with deadly intent and use sharp weaponry against me. Sasuke rolled his eyes. You say that like you're not fighting with the intention to kill either. I guffawed at that. Ha! Please, if I went at you with the intention to kill, you wouldn't last a minute. I'm already literally pulling my punches, well sometimes, and when I use any weapon I don't swing them too fast for you to avoid. Don't forget, with my Sharingan, I can see where you're moving towards and how fast you are, so I can adjust my strength and speed to the point where you can just narrowly avoid them. But don't get complacent. If you're not fighting like your life is on the line, if you're not moving as fast as possible and if you're not dodging like I truly wanted to kill you, I might just accidentally cut off an arm or a leg. The other boy frowned, almost pouting, before folding his arms and looking away almost petulantly. Fine, I get it. You can kick my ass. Stop bragging about your Sharingan. I'll reawaken them soon enough. Then we can have a fair match. Besides, how did you get so strong anyways? It was only a few months ago I kicked your ass during our final year examinations. Well, that was a whole dungeon and several level ups ago, so of course I was now stronger than Sasuke. Furthermore, fighting with the hidden boss was rewarding not just in terms of experience or stat boosts, it also sharpened my combat instincts and greatly expanded my fight IQ. Being put in a situation where a single mistake could find myself missing an arm, leg or even a head, forced me into a state of hyper-awareness. Any martial artist, when fighting, must first process their actions and think with their brain before sending a signal down to their limbs to execute those commands. This greatly limits their reaction speed, thus hampering their maximum potential and ability to fight effectively. However, if one could conquer that intrinsic limitation and allow their instinct to take over their body so to reduce that lag, it would mean multiplying their combat effectiveness manifolds. Letting the body move instinctually would free up the mind of the fighter to plan, strategize and analyze. That meant not allowing your instincts to run amok and swing mindlessly, but to guide those instincts with critical thinking and problem solving during the fight. The winner in any fight is not the strongest or the fastest, with some exceptions of course, but the smartest. I had yet to reach a point of harmonizing body and mind perfectly, but it could be considered that I had taken the very first step. Mentally shaking away those thoughts, I just chuckled at Sasuke's query. The Sharingan helps a bunch of course. And more importantly, I was using chakra to augment strength and speed. Sasuke widened his eyes. You mean chakra enhancement? Active chakra enhancement. That's supposed to be an advanced technique. How did you? I grinned internally. I already prepared a set of answers to any questions he would have. It was only rudimentary to prepare so as to not be caught flat-footed in any such interrogations. Outwardly, however, I just rubbed the back of my head embarrassedly. Well, if I am being honest, I used the Sharingan to observe a Taijutsu spar between two Chunins. I just somehow picked it up when watching them. The Uchiha gasped softly. Wait, weren't you the one who said you wanted to keep your lineage a secret? Why are you using our bloodline limit so flagrantly then? I waved off his concern. Calm down, I was discreet about it. I made sure no one else was around, and it was only for a few moments. And remember, I'm top of the class at stealth training. But still, that was an unnecessary risk, don't you think? Not that I particularly mind if you revealed your ancestry to the village, but if you don't want him to know about it, then you should at least have more self-control. Geez, I never had a mom, but I'd imagine that's what having a mom would be like. Nagi, I teased. Widening his eyes in frustration, Sasuke turned away again. You. Fine, do whatever you want. See if I care. I chuckled at his reaction. For such a broody avenger, he sure acted like a kid sometimes. I wondered if it might have more to do with a perceived brotherly connection he saw us having that acted as a substitute of the relationship he had with Itachi. Or it might just be a relapse into something akin to a familial warmth and affection that he so craved yet was deprived of for so long. Sometimes I had to remind myself it was still just a few months since the Uchiha massacre, and he wasn't the older Sasuke I was more familiar with, who had more time to stew in his vengeance and hatred. Was that a good thing? That I was still unsure of. If taking Itachi's place as a surrogate brother for Sasuke dampened his edge and thus limited his potential, then I would have to draw back if I wanted him strong enough to be by Naruto's side in the final confrontation. However, there was also the possibility that it might temper his talent even further if I could train him and guide him towards a direction that did not involve Orochimaru and curse seals. Or was that eventuality necessary after all? Who was to say I could teach him better than one of the legendary Sannin? Claiming to know more about being a shinobi than the snake Sannin would be a ludicrous notion. Did Sasuke need Orochimaru and his guidance to realize his true potential? Or was the Sannin an obstacle, hampering Sasuke's growth to limit his strength in order for Orochimaru to have an easier time taking over his body? Too many questions, and not enough answers. All I could do now was take a step at a time and hold myself back from forming any grand plans with the admittedly limited information I did have. The least I could do was help guide Sasuke best that I could. Whatever happens, happens. I had also considered taking Naruto under my wing, so at the very least he would not graduate the academy dead last. The time he spent in the academy only served to severely hamper his growth as a shinobi and led to him possessing little to no practical skill in being a ninja, with too little exceptions. However, there was too much at stake for me to act without forethought. If Naruto doesn't fail the graduation exam, Mitsuki wouldn't try to trick him into stealing the forbidden scroll of seals. Which meant he wouldn't be able to learn the jutsu that defined his character and formed an overwhelming majority of his repertoire. The Kichibunshin was essential for Naruto's growth. From learning the Rasengan, nature transformation, to create the Rasen Shuriken, utilizing Sage Mode, to unleashing hordes of clones cloaked in the Golden Ninetales chakra during the final war. The butterfly effect would have disastrous consequences if I intervened too much to change the course of history. Even now, my existence alone would already threaten the integrity of my knowledge of future events. Not to mention revealing my Sharingan and lineage to Sasuke, and training him as I was now. All of these might have unforeseen consequences that might have a fatal effect in the final outcome of the war. It was simply too much for me to manage all of these possibilities, so all I could do was minimize the effect I was having on the world. If that meant standing by the sidelines and watching Naruto sabotage his own education, then so be it. And our top scorer of the year is Shinji Ikari. Well done, Shinji. Keep it up. Iruka announced to the applause of the class. I stood up from my seat and bowed. Personally, I didn't feel it to be such a noteworthy achievement, but I still had to play the part of the humble genius. At this point I was already so far ahead of the class it wasn't even funny. I held myself back just enough to show I was slightly better than everyone but enough to be an oddity. I still lost to Sasuke in the Taijutsu examination, but that was by design. It wouldn't make sense otherwise if an orphan who solely utilized the academy fighting style could trump over the last Uchiha who used his clan's exclusive Taijutsu style. In terms of Taijutsu, not even Sasuke could match me anymore even without chakra enhancement, Sharingan, and power strike, reinforcing my blows. My pure stats alone were already superior to his. I was assuming of course since I still wasn't able to view an individual's stat points, but I outperformed the boy in every physical metric during the physical proficiency test, so there was some substance to my claims. My level had stagnated since the last time I went dungeon diving, but my stats and skills had been slowly but steadily improving. With the eye patch and the special dumbbell I got from the dungeon boss, my STR training shot up crazily. When I reached 50 STR, I gained a new perk. Coincidentally, my DEX similarly reached 50 at around the same time too. Lesser muscularity, you have acquired a rudimentary accomplishment in strengthening your body. Plus 20% increase to physical damage. Plus 20 kilograms increase in exertion of physical force. Lesser agility, you have acquired a rudimentary accomplishment in proficiency of your body's dexterity. Plus 20% increase to movement speed. Increased expertise in stealth, finesse and flexibility. Since 3 out of 4 of my main stats were now at or above 50, I pumped in a few of my free points to my VIT as well, just to even things out. As a result, I got another perk. Lesser physicality, you have acquired a rudimentary accomplishment in tempering your bodily health. Plus 10% increase to max HP. Plus 10% increase to HP recovery rate. Minus 10% to physical damage taken. Increased stamina. Because of the 3 new perks, my physical prowess was greatly improved. With them, and the plethora of skills I had, I could confidently proclaim myself to be the strongest Taijutsu practitioner in our year, or even in the entire academy with little margin for error. Of course I wouldn't be able to prove that anytime soon since I still had to hide the extent of my strength. After Sasuke allowed me entry into his clan's jutsu library, my horizons were expanded greatly. Unfortunately however, my actual skill list had barely any difference. See, Sasuke was stubborn about a few things, vengeance, training and brooding. However, there was one other thing he refused to budge on that really irked me. Before his parents passed, the boy was given strict instruction never to explore the jutsu library beyond his capabilities. Meaning he observed the same rules as what any shinobi would encounter in the Konoha library. That is, he followed a self-imposed mandate to not explore the genin section and beyond before he achieved the corresponding rank. Such a principle baffled me initially. There it was, the easiest shortcut for him to attain the strength he so dearly desired, yet he refused to budge on this matter. However, when I heard his explanation it made sense. His desire to obey one of the last instructions of his deceased parents far outweighed his desire to avenge his clan. Since they were no longer living, the few ways he could still honor them and show filial piety was to at the very least not succumb to the temptation of the advanced techniques in the library and comply with their instruction. Unfortunately for me, however, he strongly believed that I too had to follow this edict. Although it wasn't all bad since we still effectively had free reign in the academy student section of the clan library. And given that when they still lived the Uchiha clan had great expectations of the scions of their clan, the academy section alone was still stocked with what might be deemed as too advanced for academy students in other clans. For example, there was an abundance of C-ranked Kaitenjutsu scrolls, basic Genjutsu scrolls, as well as a supply of different Taijutsu manuals on display. As a result, my ninjutsu repertoire was expanded greatly, and I also began my foray into Genjutsu. Furthermore, I was also able to pick up other fighting styles and thus not be limited to the academy fighting style, which was elementary at best when compared to what the Uchiha clan had hoarded. The decades of combating foreign shinobi and copying their techniques with the Sharingan meant that over the years a plethora of different techniques were accumulated. I found out that just by learning and creating the skills for different Taijutsu styles, it leveled up my intermediate Taijutsu mastery. It appeared that the system deemed my holistic knowledge of martial arts as an increase in proficiency over the discipline of Taijutsu overall. Similarly, learning and creating skills for different Bukajutsu techniques also leveled up my myriad armament fiend skill. I glanced over at Sasuke as I sat down following Iruka's announcement, and our eyes met. It seemed he was still somewhat upset over the fact that I let him win the Taijutsu contest. Before the end of year examinations, we had already discussed the reasons behind my actions, or at least what I told him was the reasons. He believed that I didn't want all the attention and thus invite greater scrutiny on me, which might potentially reveal my lineage on accident. Yet he was still dissatisfied even with that justification. It seemed more like his pride and ego was damaged, since he knew I could handily trounce him in our spars. Especially after I picked up the various Taijutsu fighting styles from the Uchiha clan library. Plus, since I too was now intimately familiar with the fighting style he was most proficient in, the Uchiha Interceptor Fist, reading his intentions and predicting his moves was simple enough even without the Sharingan's clarity of vision. However, what he didn't know was that there were some further machinations to this performance. What I was truly planning for was the eventual graduation and subsequent genin team formation. There was some truth to what I had told Sasuke. I genuinely wanted to avoid the attention being perceived as an overwhelming genius would cast upon me. However, if all I wanted was to avoid the attention, then why do so well in the academy in the first place? That was because I intend to maneuver myself to be on the same team as Naruto. Following the canonical team formation, Sasuke, Naruto and Sakura would find themselves on the same team. This was designed to create a balanced team by placing the Rookie of the Year, the Dead Last and the Top Kunoichi together. Thus, if I wanted to be placed together with Naruto, then I had to be Rookie of the Year when I graduated. The reasoning behind this could be attributed partly to guilt and a desire to make up to the Jinchuriki. If I truly intended to damn Naruto to remain as the dead last in order for him to acquire the Kichibun Shinjutsu, then I was going to make sure I could be in the same team as him, so I train him up and ensure he prosper. The air was thick with a musky stench and a cacophony of dogs barking as Kiba led me into the Inuzuka clan compound. I looked around, wondering how Inuzukas could go to sleep or do anything that needed some amount of peace and quiet in this racket. Not just the noisiness, but the smell too. It was like a 24/7 smell of wet dogs that permeated the area. I could smell the place before I even walked in. The Inuzuka clan compound was a far cry from the Uchihas. Unlike the self-contained, mini-village the Uchiha sequestered themselves in, the Inuzuka clan lived in what appeared to be a collection of buildings marked with their clan symbol. We walked further into the compound with Kiba occasionally pointing out buildings and telling me what they were for, as well as Akamaru who yipped in agreement beside us. There were also several people, dressed in shinobi garb and correspondingly accompanied by their own ninken, who greeted Kiba from afar. Not the polite, "Hi," how are you doing, but more along the lines of, hey what's up Kiba you runt. Which only invited said Inuzuka to growl and yell back with whatever retort that first came to his mind. We reached our destination shortly and Kiba opened the door to the Inuzuka veterinary clinic, which incidentally served as the only veterinary clinic in Konoha, while yelling, "Ni-san! You here?" At his voice, the several other animals who were in the clinic began responding in kind with their respective cries. A muffled voice from the back yelled back, "In the back." Kiba turned to me and motioned for me to follow him while waving to the receptionist at the counter. The receptionist, another Inuzuka I assumed, waved back cheerily, "Hey Kiba-kun. Back from school." The Inuzuka heir stopped at the counter to pet the small chihuahua-looking dog that was lounging lazily on the tabletop. "Yo Manami-san." "Yep, just here to see my sister." The now identified Manami turned to me with a quizzical look, "And who's your friend here?" I stepped forward to introduce myself. Hello, my name is Shinji Ikrai. I'm Kiba's classmate from the Shinobi Academy." "Nice to meet you." She chuckled, "Ara, how polite." "Nice to meet you too." "Why are you here, Shinji-kun?" Kiba cut in to explain, "He's here to see my sis." "Oh. Whatever for? Do you have a sick pet?" Shaking my head, I answered, "Nope. Just something I wanted to ask her." Manami seemed satisfied even with the admittedly non-answer. "I see. Well, just go right on ahead. She's in the back." "Aight, see ya later Minami-san. And you too Chibi-chan." Kiba replied while ruffling the top of the chihuahua's head. The small dog seemed completely content to just let the boy do whatever he wanted as it continued sleeping, indifferent to his remarks. We went through the door in the back and entered some sort of an examination room. A young woman with auburn the same brown hair and distinctive red fang marks as Kiba's sat at a table writing into a notepad. "Just a second," she stated, still looking and writing on her notepad. Kiba just walked in and made himself at home by sitting on the examination table and propping up his legs. "Sure. What's up Inchi, Ni-san?" He greeted the three dogs that were laying in the corner of the examination room, who barked in response. I stood awkwardly at the door, unsure whether or not I should join Kiba on the examination table, but that might just seem rude, while Akamaru joined his owner by jumping up on the table and laying his head on Kiba's lap comfortably. The three dogs with grey fur stared at me curiously but remained where they were. It seemed like they were ready and waiting for their owner's signal to do anything in regard to me, be it greeting or attacking. "And, done," Hannah said to herself as she finished writing and closed the notepad before looking up at us. "What's up?" Kiba gestured towards me. "Oh, this is Shinji. He's a friend from school." Turning back to me, he continued, "This is my sister Hannah." Walking towards her, I bowed in greeting. "Nice to meet you. I'm Shinji Ikrai." Hannah didn't seem particularly comfortable with the formality of the exchange, so I quickly loosened up to put her at ease. She nodded acknowledgement. "Right then, now that that's out of the way, what can I do you for?" Kiba once again cut in to explain. "This guy asked if I knew any medic nin, so I told him yeah I did, you. Then he asked if he could meet you, so I brought him here." His sister made an face and asked, "Why do you need to see a medic nin? If you're sick you should go to the hospital you know. This is a veterinary clinic. We treat animals." I know, Kiba told me about it." But you did undergo training as a medic nin, right? As in, you are licensed to treat people?" Hannah looked back at me with a questioning look. "Of course. Why are you asking? Like I said, if you need medical help, you should really go to the hospital instead. Unless there's some reason you can't. She glanced at Kiba, trying to ascertain some clue to the purpose of my visit, but the boy already made his way to her dogs and was scratching one of them on the back of their ear. I cleared my throat to get back her attention. Let me assure you I'm not in need of medical attention at the moment. Not as far as I know, at least. As for why I'm here, well, here's the thing. I paused while shifting uncomfortably in place, trying to give off the timid and self-conscious vibe. I want to learn medical ninjutsu, I declared. There was a moment of silence, with Hannah seeming like she was taking some time to absorb what I just said before her face twisted with disbelief. Why are you telling me that? Are you asking me to teach you or something? Yes, please consider my request. I gave another 90-degree bow again and stayed there. This is ridiculous. You're in the same class as Kiba, right? That means you're, what, in the 3rd year? I ain't teaching an academy student medical ninjutsu. That would just be wasting both of our time. She countered dismissively. I understand your apprehension. But please just give me a chance, I won't let you down. I continued bowing. Oi, can you just stand properly? Getting bowed to feels weird. She requested, and I complied. Frowning, she continued, look, you either take medical ninjutsu way too lightly, or you are really delusional about your own limits. Either way, that rubs me the wrong way, kid. Hana-san, I mean no disrespect, but, well, not to brag, but I have some confidence in my chakra control. I insisted while looking her straight in the eyes. My comment made her raise an eyebrow with some degree of mockery. Oh really? Why don't you tell me about your chakra control then? I tried my best not to let any of the internal frustration I was currently feeling show on my face, reminding myself there was a reason why I was doing this. Really, it was all about having someone I could point to as being the one who taught me medical ninjutsu if I was ever asked about it. Being able to heal someone with just chakra was a very important, very useful skill. I didn't want to be in a position where someone needed to be treated, but I hesitated because I had a reason not to reveal it. Which was why I was currently prostrating myself in front of someone who severely underestimated me, admitted with good reason, since from the outside I appeared just like a cocky academy student who thought himself special. I believe I have mastered tree walking, and recently I have started on water walking, Hana-san, no, Hana-sensei. I divulged. All of which was true, by the way. I only recently fully mastered the tree walking exercise, which took longer than expected. After a certain point, the skill was stuck at level 9, no matter how much I practiced. Only when I started actively using tree walking in more intense and distracting situations like shadow sparring with an imaginary opponent, that it finally leveled up. Upon which I began water walking, and sure enough created the water walking skill in under an hour. Now she started to look just the slightest bit interested. That's really impressive, is what I would say if that was actually something to brag about. Having good chakra control at your age could only mean one thing: you have shit chakra reserves. Having low chakra reserves tend to mean your chakra control will be proportionately better. But low chakra reserves also mean that you would be a shit medic nin if you get tired after just one jutsu. And who are you calling sensei, kid? Don't think I didn't catch that. As she harumphed and looked back at me challengingly, I gave an embarrassed cough. Embarrassed not for me but for her, of course. Actually, I'm pretty confident in my chakra reserves too. I've been told I have one of the highest chakra pool in the class. So, that shouldn't be a problem, Hana-sensei. Bullshit. And who told you that? Your mom. Hana demanded with incredulity. At that, from the corner of my eye I could see Kiba turn back slightly, but he cleverly declined to correct her. He was right, it wasn't really his place to do so. It was mine. Actually, I'm an orphan. I responded blankly. Hana flinched. Oh, shit, my bad. But my point stands. Well, to answer your question, one of the tune-in instructors at the academy told me. This was a lie. Technically. I knew I had one of the highest chakra pools in the class, second only to Naruto of course. No one specifically told me that, but I could see it using, observe. So yes, it was technically a lie. Hana leveled her gaze at me for a moment. I don't know how you expect me to believe this shit, but you know what, let's suppose I do, just for the fun of it. Even if you have good chakra control and decent chakra reserves, you can't start learning medical ninjutsu just like that. Do you even know anything about the human biology? How our organs function, where do our veins meet, the position of every single one of the 206 bones in our body? It takes years of studying just to get to the starting line. Fret not, Hana-sensei, I came prepared. I've already read and memorized most of the basic medical texts. So I can safely say I do have the minimum standard of knowledge needed to start learning medical ninjutsu. Seeing that she looked dubious at my claims, I continued to explain, I like reading, and medical ninjutsu has interested me for a very long time. Yeah, he's a real bookworm, sis. Spends half his time in the library of all places. And I don't know if this would mean anything, but he has been top of the class for 2 years running. Kiba added, coming to my aid. Our friendship was something carefully nurtured, and at a certain point in our relationship, he had come to recognize me, in the primal and animalistic way of how he perceived the world, as the alpha of the class. He was initially stubborn and headstrong about his place in the class hierarchy, declaring himself to be the alpha male and leader of the pack. But after years of me physically dominating him in both our physical proficiency tests and spars, as well as the amiable way I interacted with him coupled with the good-humored persona I crafted, I slowly earned his trust and respect. Plus, being able to see what he thought of me with, observe, helped plenty as well. Heh. I don't really trust either of you though. Hana teasingly replied, to her brother's vexation but resignation. It seemed that their relationship was as one-sidedly dominant as he and I had. So let me tell you what she started as she opened the desk drawer and started riffling through some files. I have here. Hana pulled out a couple pieces of paper stapled together and offered them to me, a copy of the Medic Nin theory test I took a few years back when I signed up to the Konoha Medic Corporation. I keep it as a memento. If you can get, say, just half of the questions right, then I will maybe possibly consider teaching you. Deal. I immediately answered as I nearly snatched the paper from her hand. 2 hours later. Hana put down her pen that was being used to grade my test and sighed with some exasperation before writing 68 on the front of the test and circled it. Well, a deal's a deal. She began to my delight. But if your chakra control and chakra reserves aren't what you said, then deal's off. Got it? Hi, Hana-sensei. She smiled, a gentler expression than any she had since I met her. Can't say I dislike the sound of that. Say it again. Hana-sensei. She gave a mirthful laugh. Good boy. 15 years old and already a sensei. Ka-san won't believe this. Whenever you're ready, I prompted, as I watched my opponent, Sasuke, tense his body. In the meantime, I activated my Sharingan, with a surge of chakra as my black irises morphed into bright red. My Tutamo Sharingan spun wildly in response to Sasuke's narrowed onyx eyes. We stood motionless for a few seconds, both of us just watching and waiting. I was waiting for his first move, while he was analyzing my stance, searching for weaknesses. He wouldn't find any, I made sure of it. The silence wouldn't last long as without warning, Sasuke flew into hand seals. Taking that as the signal to begin, I ran towards him. When the Uchiha formed the last of his hand seals, the tiger seal indicated to me that he was likely going to use a fire release technique. Not that I needed to guess anyways, recognized what he was about to use from the hand seals alone. Kaiten, Hosenkan no Jutsu. Sasuke spat out a volley of fireballs into the air in different directions, but all were converging towards a single target: me. Whirlwind steps. An invisible and indiscernible flow of energy saturated my legs as I activated the soldier's swift boots item effect. Instantly, I felt myself moving faster. Twice as fast to be exact. I darted away from the volley of small fireballs flying at me with ease and resumed my advance towards my opponent, Sasuke. I could see his eyes visibly widen at my increased speed, not used to such a drastic difference since I never used the item effect against him before. But this time it was different. The two us, Sasuke and I, have been engaging in intense fights for the past 2 years. I called them fights, not spars, because we always went all out with deadly intent. Well, him anyways. I usually performed just slightly above what he was capable of. We were already in the last year of the academy, yet despite our best efforts his Sharingan has still not awakened. I was genuinely baffled, to be honest. I was sure my theory was right, but something just wasn't clicking. But recently I had an epiphany. In order to force Sasuke to reawaken his Sharingan, he had to truly believe he was in mortal peril. Therefore, today, I would utterly push him to death's door, or so I would have him think. Sasuke backed off in response to my rapid advance, but I was too fast for him to escape. I could see his eyes twitching in thought, running through all the possible scenarios and simulations of this fight. We fought plenty enough for him to know that most of the skills in his repertoire were already proven to be useless against me. As a result, he also knew that it was only a matter of time before I caught him slipping and ended the match. Yet that was the crux of the problem. The notion that I was eventually going to catch him and end the fight with him bruised but relatively unscathed meant that there was still a part of him that maintained the awareness that I was not genuinely trying to take his life. I speculated that it was this awareness that was holding him back from entering a state of mortal peril, which correspondingly hindered him from awakening his already existing Sharingan. It was no longer the time for mercy and leniency. It was time for action. Sasuke stopped backing away, realizing the futility of the action since my catching up to him was inevitable. The 3 basic academy jutsus were out, my Sharingan could see through them all. His collection of elemental jutsu were also useless against someone who could overpower them all with his own taijutsu, out of the question. He was aware that I outmatched him in every aspect of physical combat with or without the Sharingan. Genjutsu. Needless to say, completely futile. What other options did he have left? Realizing that he had none, Sasuke stood his ground and unsheathed the wakizashi from his back. It was a weapon he had picked up after witnessing my own skills with it. I found it just a little cute that he was trying to imitate me, but his skills with the blade left much to be desired. I taught him the basics, but he declined to learn more from me, claiming that he wanted his kenjutsu techniques to be a secret from me, so he could take me by surprise during our matches. Clever, but pointless and frankly disadvantageous to himself. There was a limit to learning kenjutsu by your own self without a teacher to guide you. I was an exception, not the rule. The fact that he was not able to grasp that meant he still had more maturing to do. In his defense, however, I was clobbering him pretty hard every time we fought, so it wasn't that surprising he wanted a hidden ace. However, I didn't push the issue. I only trained Sasuke in the basics and fundamentals, as well as regularly acting as a sparring partner. Other than that, I was almost completely hands-off with his training. I didn't want him to rely on me for power, not like how he relied on Orochimaru. Since I still wasn't sure if him defecting to the Snake Sanin would ultimately be better for his growth. As I approached him, he swung the Wakizashi at me, a layer of chakra coating the blade that was made of chakra metal. In response, I activated a skill that I had created with the gamer system after some experimentation over the years, Shinkyoken. The skill was a result of some experimentation with chakra enhancement, and was derived from a taijutsu style I found in the Uchiha Jutsu repository, called Shinkyoken, meaning True Void Fist. The bombastic name was what drew me to the martial art in the first place, but upon reading the scroll, I was slightly disappointed to find that the moves within as well as its philosophies closely resembled karate. It was a martial art that was created to replace the need for any weapons other than oneself, emphasizing the human hands as the deadliest weapon of them all. However, it was an insidious fighting style that incorporated eye gouging, throat punches, fish hooking and ear ripping. But at the same time, it also required the user to be able to harden their hands through conditioning to the point of being able to poke holes into concrete with just their fingers. The premise of Shinkyoken was to strengthen one's hands and fingers such that any punch, knife hand or spear hand had the lethality to kill as easily as with a bladed weapon. On paper, it sounded like a taijutsu style that was extremely deadly. However, it only experienced a brief moment of glory before it faded into obscurity as the scroll explained that there were only 2 recorded masters of the martial art, the progenitor of Shinkyoken and his only disciple. The problem with this style was that it was simply too difficult and took too long for someone to develop the required durability in order to practically utilize its techniques. Originally, practitioners of Shinkyoken, to condition their hands, would undergo Jiribako training, thrusting their fingers into a bucket of sand and then slowly building up towards harder and harder alternatives. Normally, this would take years if not a decade to develop tough enough hands to punch through concrete without chakra. No sane person would spend 10 years punching rocks, breaking their fingers, waiting for them to heal and only to break them again just to learn how to kill without a weapon when there were plenty of other alternatives Shinobi could use for the same effect. Initially, I dismissed its teachings as purely nonsensical as well. But after some time practicing and experimenting just out of curiosity during some downtime, the skill, Shinkyoken, was created. However, unlike other skills, this particular one, though it may seem strange, changed the physical properties of my body just with its inception. Without undergoing the necessary training, my hands and fingers were hardened to the point of being able to utilize Shinkyoken at a minimum standard. However, the skill was still at level 1, so I wasn't able to do something as preposterous as poking holes into rocks yet. I could perhaps thrust a spear hand through inch-thick plywood. But according to the skill description, the durability of my hands and fingers would increase in proportion to its level. And when used in conjunction with Chakra enhancement. It turned my hands into lethal weapons like a cleaver, needle or spear depending on which form I used. As a result, I could easily do things like deflecting Sasuke's wakizashi with just my hand. The flat part of course, not the edge. We exchanged blows, me with a knife hand reinforced with chakra and him with a wakizashi sharpened with chakra. A third-party observer might have commented that we looked pretty even, but only because I allowed it to be. The biggest problem Sasuke had facing against me was his inability to use chakra enhancement to increase his bodily strength and speed. Thus, he would never be able to overpower my strength or surpass my speed. And without the Sharingan to negate such a disadvantage in a typical fight, it was a wall that could not be overcome without strategy or preparation. I got bored of the monotonous exchange and decided to deprive him of his weapon, to extract some sort of a fearful reaction. I parried his last thrust with my left hand and with my right one I jabbed the tendon on his wrist, forcing him to release his grip on the wakizashi. Before Sasuke could react, I closed the distance and fluidly elbowed him in the nose, knocking him back. As Sasuke nursed his now bleeding nose, I used, observe, on the Uchiha's blade. Satori, wakizashi, grade, epic. An heirloom short sword passed down in the Uchiha clan, only to be wielded by the leader of the clan. The sword has seen many battles and taken even more lives, reaping its way through multiple wars and over 100 years of the world's history. It is the masterpiece of an extraordinarily skillful master blacksmith. The balance, edge and strength of the sword is unparalleled amongst its kind, but only a master swordsman is able to bring out its full potential. Durability, 340/340. Damage, STR plus 43. DEX plus 61. Plus 33% to physical damage. Plus 33% to attack speed. Item skill, Phantom Butterfly, active. CP cost, 800. Allows user to flicker in and out of corporeality for 10 seconds at will. For every second spent incorporeal, user must spend 1 second corporeal. Cooldown 1 hour. Holy fucking shit, this was like a final boss loot drop level item appearing during the tutorial of a game. The bonus DEX stats it gave was even higher than my own DEX stat. Not to mention the increase in physical damage and attack speed. The item skill effect was even more preposterous. Such a weapon was wasted on an academy student, who I presumed to have found it in the Uchiha clan armory or in his father's possessions. He most likely took it for his own use, seeing that there was no one around to stop him. He did have the right to use it since he was technically the Uchiha clan leader by virtue of being the only living and loyal member of his clan. The fact that even with the Beidis sword Sasuke still stood no chance against me physical only confirmed my theory that the item effects, be they stat boosts or item skills, only affected me who was under the gamer system. Anyone else would only see it as a very well-made sword with a lot of history, but only I could use it to its full potential. But as much as I lusted for the epic grade wakizashi, it was not mine to covet. I was willing to admit that after spending so much time with Sasuke over the years, I had formed a sort of familial bond with him. I started seeing him as the brother I never had, and he saw me as the brother he would rather have. The short sword, as crazily overpowered as it was, belonged to the Uchiha clan. It belonged to my brother. I could never covet his possession unless he gave it to me willingly. I did have some integrity after all. I picked up Satori and threw it back at him, the short sword embedding itself in the ground in front of him. Your skills with the blade is dubious. It is an excellent sword, but it will only do you more harm than good to use it when you barely know how to swing and stab properly. I mentioned, if you want to properly use it, improve your skills first before swinging it around like it's a broken branch. Sasuke ignored my suggestion and removed Satori from the dirt it was stabbing into, before getting into a kenjutsu stance. Even now, I saw the fragility of his stance, a sign of his obvious unfamiliarity with it. I sighed at him ignoring my suggestion but shrugged it off. He would learn the lesson the hard way then. Without waiting for a signal from him, I continued our fight. However, unlike our previous exchange, I decided to finish this with as much brutality as I could without being too damaging. From his perspective I vanished mid-run and reappeared within his guard. I had used Flash Step to increase my movement drastically, moving fast enough to appear as though I teleported to the untrained eye. Shocked at my sudden appearance, Sasuke couldn't even react accordingly before I attacked. Utilizing Shinkyoken, I swiped at his torso, and with my extended index and middle finger I left 2 bloody gashes across his chest. I wasn't trying to kill him, of course. I measured the distance and force of the strike so that I would just barely cut his chest. Maximum visual effect but ultimately non-fatal. He was surprised at the sudden brutality of my offense and made to counter with an open palm aimed at my chin. I quickly intercepted his attack by jabbing his bicep, which knocked away his arm, and then with a clawing motion tore into his outstretched forearm. Blood spurted out again, splattering on both of us, but I didn't relent. I continuously attacked him with Shinkyoken, slicing into his flesh just deep enough to draw blood but nothing too dangerous. Whenever he tried fighting back, I countered and went at him harder. If he attempted to escape or move away, I would rapidly catch up and punish him for doing so. After just 30 seconds, Sasuke was bleeding all over with open cuts littered on his torso, arms, thighs, and with the last stab, a particularly deep gash opened up on his cheek just below his right eye. That last one he received in his attempt to retreat, which I let succeed. The boy wasn't particularly short on breath, since the fight had only been going on for a minute or two, but the continual blood loss had him weak and fatigued. His legs were wobbly, and body unsteady from the dizziness and nausea. His breathing quickened, a response from his brain to compensate for the sudden loss in oxygen intake due to the loss of blood, and the sheen from the film of cold sweat on him was apparent. "Wait, stop. I yield," he said, surrendering. Sasuke's eyes were shaking, unused to the savagery and cruelty of my attacks. I usually had to prompt him to yield before he would be willing to swallow the bitter pill of defeat and concede. But this time he capitulated on his own accord, unlike our previous battles. "You yield." I leveled a cold glare on the Uchiha and hissed out. He nodded, reluctant, but ultimately he understood the difference between our capabilities. To hold on persistently would only be counterproductive. "No." I simply responded and continued my assault on the boy. Wait. You." I said. "I yield, are you crazy?" he panically asked while desperately trying to evade the viciousness of Shinkyoken. He swung his wakizashi at me from an obtuse angle, trying to catch me off guard, but I mercilessly sliced into the back of his hand holding the blade, forcing him to release it, and landed a fist on the open gashes of his torso. I then threw a low kick at the side of his knee, sweeping him off his feet and sending him groaning in pain and onto the ground. Looking down on the now 12-year-old boy who cradled his knee and other wounds while laying flacidly on the floor, I narrowed my eyes. "Is this all your resolve amounts to? Surrender? How pathetic." Sasuke returned a murderous glare at me, but the anger behind his look bounced off my armor of indifference and cold resentment ineffectively. After all this time, you still haven't awakened your Sharingan. You are just wasting my time. I coldly continued. You speak of lofty goals, killing Itachi and rebuilding your clan. But when the going gets tough, you yield. Your determination is weak. Your will is lacking. Your resolve, feeble. With every biting word, I saw his resolve shaking. He glared, but the emotion behind them wavered. He knew what I said was true, no matter how much he wanted to deny them. As much as I was disappointed with him, he was even more disappointed with himself. You know nothing. He shakily replied, internally cursing his own ineptitude. Nothing. No, I know everything. I have been here for the last 3 years training with you. And I have seen all that I needed to see. You are a disappointment. Shut up. He growled, struggling to get back up to his feet, but I cut off his attempts by kicking him in the chest and sending him rolling on the ground. Weak, so weak. But I am let down not by your lack of strength. No, strength can be cultivated. What I despise is your sickeningly paltry resolve. Avenge your clan. Don't make me laugh. If you can't even stand up to me, if you surrender so easily, what hopes would you have against your brother? I stated while taking slow measured steps towards the boy. You bastard. Don't screw with me, Shinji. You're just like him. I lack hatred, is that it? Tell me. Sasuke yelled in response, hammering the ground with a closed fist once and again tried to pick himself up. He swore at his trembling body and pounded himself in the chest, but it was of no use. His body, bloodied and beaten, refused to listen to him. Tears welled up in his eyes, as a scream of indignation left his mouth. HMPH. It is not hatred that you lack. It is courage. The will to keep fighting no matter what tries to stop you. The drive to succeed even if you had to die trying. Your determination is weak and fleeting. It pales in comparison to your brother's. Don't screw with me, Shinji, he repeated, only this time it was no longer anger that fueled him but a deepening despair. Not you, why are you saying this? A pang of guilt struck my heart, but I had to continue. Otherwise all of this would have been for naught. Tez. You make me sick. I spat out, as chakras swirled menacingly around my straightened fingers. Please dodge this, I pleaded mentally in my mind, raising my hand in preparation to strike him down. You are no Uchiha. You do not deserve that name. You should have died that day along with the rest of your family. With that, I thrust it downwards, desperately praying he would avoid it. And at the last minute, he did. Sasuke rolled out of the way, his eyes looking back at me and his face twisted in unholy anger. How dare you? You take that back. Take it back. I'm an Uchiha. I will kill Itachi. And I will kill you. He roared out furiously and a second wind overtook his exhausted body. Running at me, he cocked back a fist and swung it at me. Slightly taken aback, I opened my mouth to say something but was forced to parry his punch. Upon seeing his initial attack failing, he went down low and swept at my feet. I moved back and Sasuke followed up with a series of ferocious kicks and punches, all of which faster and more accurate than ever before. Narrowly evading a back fist, I leaned back to make some space between us only to be caught by a spinning back kick that landed on my jaw. Minus 332 HP. I got knocked back and barely had time to register the hit before Sasuke raged onwards, his attacks wild and savage but with a method to his madness. Getting over my initial shock, I moved in to grapple him. I blocked a fist and my other hand snaked in to grab his wrist. Not letting him break out of my hold, I twisted his arm and locked his upper limbs into a tangled mess. But the boy did not relent, attempting to knee my torso with his free legs. I took the hit with a clenched jaw but took the opportunity to trip his other supporting leg. I threw him down on the ground and continued a death grip on his arms as he violently resisted, trying to break free. "Sasuke!" I shouted, trying to get his attention. But he ignored me, only focusing on trying to break free. I shifted my position so that I was mounted on top of him, sitting on his torso while holding down his arms. "Sasuke!" I yelled again, and this time it worked. He stopped and glared at me. "What?" the boy angrily demanded, but was then shocked to see a warm smile on my face. "You did it," I simply answered and loosened my grip on him. He looked back in confusion but still with some anger behind it. "Did what?" I released him and stood back up, smiling down at the confused Uchiha still on the ground. "Your eyes. Your Sharingan is awake." He widened his eyes, the red and black of the Uchiha clan's bloodline limit staring back at me. 1 Tomo on his left eye and 2 on his right. Quest, Sharingan Reawakening, completed. Help Sasuke awaken his Sharingan, square root. Bonus, complete quest before graduating from the academy, square root. Hidden, complete quest within 1 year, X. Rewards. Plus 5,000 EXP. Significantly increased rep with Uchiha Sasuke. Bonus, skill, Genjutsu, Sharingan. Hidden, plus 2 LVL2, Sharingan. Genjutsu, Sharingan, active, LVL, 1. CP cost, 400. User can trap an opponent within a genjutsu when establishing eye contact with the target. Does not work if target has a higher level Sharingan or other effects that grants immunity to ocular genjutsu. Improved proficiency in the skill increases difficulty of breaking out of the illusion. "Goddamn it, Shinji, did you really have to carve me up like this?" Sasuke hissed, now shirtless and lying on the grass. "Stop whining already." "It worked, didn't it?" I responded as the soft green glow of medical chakra emanating from my palm washed over the numerous cuts on his skin, some of which slowly closing upon receiving the treatment. "Yeah, it did." Sasuke muttered under his breath, and I hid the concern from my expression. Following the fight and subsequent revelation of his reawakened Sharingan, he cooled off after I explained to him why I had done what I did and why I said what I said. He reluctantly accepted the reasoning behind my actions but was still nursing a grudge. He might have understood that I was only trying to help him, but still resented the words I said to him. More specifically, he hated that it was true. I tried to argue back that if what I said was true, that he wouldn't have found the will to fight back and awaken his Sharingan, but the damage was done. I contemplated if what I did was the right thing to do, forcefully awakening his dojutsu but in exchange potentially sabotaging the relationship we have built up over the years. Did the ends justify the means? Or would we be able to move on from this like nothing ever happened? Time would tell. We shared a moment of silence, a little uncomfortable if I was being completely honest, as I finished healing him up. Most of the cuts on him were shallow, only skin deep and effective at drawing blood, but not so much life-threatening nor particularly hazardous to his overall health. There was only one that cut deep enough to leave a scar, and that was the gash under his right eye. And that's about it. "You're good to go," I said, releasing the medical ninjutsu and letting the green glow of medical chakra fade away. He sat up and examined his body, satisfied that at least he looked no worse for wear than when we first started. The only indication of him being in a bloody and brutal fight just 30 minutes before was the blood stains left on his clothes and skin. "Oh, but the cut on below your eye, that's going to leave a scar," I mentioned while wiping off the blood from my hands from coming into contact with his skin with a rag. "That's fine," he remarked before getting up and putting on the spare shirt he brought. There was another uncomfortable silence that settled between us, as neither knew how to carry on the conversation. Trying to lighten the mood, I added, "Well, you can probably get the scar removed if you go to the hospital. My medical ninjutsu isn't as good as actual medic nin. You could get your pretty face back again." Sasuke shook his head, and looked back at me. "No. I'm going to keep it. To remind myself." "Remind yourself of what?" "Of my resolve." "I see. Hey Shinji." "Yeah. Thanks. For helping me." HMPH, well, if you're so grateful, I could take that wakizashi as payment for services." "Fuck off." The green glow of the medical ninjutsu faded and the whimpering of the little dog on the examination table stopped. I stopped the jutsu and examined the area where I was healing. Finding no blemish except for the patch of bald skin that was once a bleeding wound, I was satisfied. The dog appeared pleased with the treatment too as it got up and started licking my face excitedly. All right. Good girl." I chuckled while ruffling the excited Ninken who was way too into licking me. Next to me, Hannah breathed out with some amazement, "A bona fide genius, eh? Who would have thought?" I grinned at her victoriously, still remembering her doubts about my ability from when I first started my apprenticeship a year ago. When she started teaching me, my medical ninjutsu mentor refused to even go into the jutsu side of things without making sure I was up to scratch on the theory. It was admittedly frustrating since I really wanted to just pick up the skills for them and just as quickly bid farewell to a short but sweet apprenticeship. But no, Hannah insisted that I needed to have a good foundation before I could even begin thinking about the chakra side of things. She had me slowly making my way through the theory and then the chakra-less side of medicine, such as basic first aid, diagnosis, and then more advanced surgical techniques like stitching and grafting. It was too painstakingly slow for my taste, and even worse, I could not create a skill for them even with the gamer system. So I had to learn everything from scratch with pure effort and tenacity. However, I myself was surprised at how quickly I picked things up. I swear I was never this book smart in my previous life, and my only guess was the int stat boosting my intelligence somehow. Additionally, since I needed the practical experience of dealing with injuries and illnesses, I was tasked with helping Hannah out at the Inuzuka Veterinary Clinic, both as part of my training and also a way to compensate Hannah for her time. Not that she allowed me access to her patients without her overbearing supervision, of course. While Hannah had a more relaxed attitude compared to other medicnins who would not have even considered teaching someone who was still in the academy, but when it came to her practice, she was as no-nonsense as the strictest sensei. Neither did I mind assisting her at the clinic, since I received a daily quest to help out at the clinic, which meant a steady supply of EXP and Rio, which were the rewards for the quests, plus increased rep with the pets, their owners, Inuzuka clan members and Hannah herself. Kiba was slightly sulky now that I had less time to hang out with him, but sometimes he would visit me at the clinic to even things out. It was only just a month ago that Hannah began imparting the actual jutsus to me, starting from the basic Shinden diagnosis technique that allowed me to use chakra to probe a patient to determine the underlying causes of their condition or for signs of injury not visible to the naked eye, and then working up to Dokunuki, poison removal techniques, and then just 2 days before I started on the Kyute Jutsu, healing hand, the basic healing jutsu that repaired physical damage. I was told that the healing hand technique was the final barrier an apprentice needed to overcome before they could proudly call themselves a medic nin. It was also the precursor to learning the more advanced Shaosen, mystical hand, technique that could allow for a medic nin to straight up perform surgeries with just their chakra alone. My flawless performance of the healing hands technique thus represented that in the eyes of the medic nin community, I could proudly call myself a medic nin, albeit still uncertified. Hannah saw my victorious grin and her eyebrow twitched. "Don't get cocky, kid, you still have a long way to go before you start going around telling people I taught you." I pouted at her claims, even though I knew that she didn't really mean it. She had bragged to me that it only took her a year to become proficient at the healing hands technique, which was an achievement impressive enough to warrant her the position of running the Inuzuka Veterinary Clinic at age 15. The fact that it only took me, an academy student, a month, was a feat nearly unprecedented. Not to say that it was a fair comparison, since when it came to jutsus I automatically created the skill once I understood how it worked, and the system would auto-correct my mistakes too. Additionally, my progress in chakra control was also unbelievably fast thanks to the system. I was already halfway to fully maxing water walking S-level with Hannah's help and constant practice with medical ninjutsu. It was like a cycle of exponential growth. Using medical ninjutsu improved my chakra control, having better chakra control improved my medical ninjutsu, so on and so forth. Add to that Hannah's tips, tricks and advice on how to sharpen my control for medical ninjutsu purposes meant that my chakra control was nearly on the same level as Hannah's own. Seeing my pout, Hannah relented. "Fine, you're incredibly amazing and I am in awe of your talent. Happy now?" She continued grumbling under her breath, from which I picked up something like 1 month and stupid geniuses making me look bad. I could tell she was upset but at the same time proud of my achievement. Deciding to give her some credit, I bowed to her and added, "I couldn't have done it without your help, Hannah-sensei. You're an incredibly amazing teacher and I am in awe of your talent." "Thank you." Hannah turned back at me, slightly stunned before breaking out into laughter. "Well, that is to be expected of the great me, of course." She approached me and put me into a headlock before ruffling my hair. My disciple is so cute, you sure have a silver tongue, eh? All the girls at the academy must go crazy for you." As she pulled me closer, I suppressed the urge to blush when I felt the swell of her chest press against my face. Recently, I discovered that I was going through something horrendous that I never thought I would experience again: the horror of puberty. I didn't know whether it was genetics or the gamer system or whatever, but when puberty hit me, it hit me hard. Along with the growth spurt also came with it the inconveniences that accompanied puberty. My mind was one of a 30-something adult, but my body belonged to a teenager, positively radiating hormones, which naturally led to some reactions to Hannah's habit of showing excessive skinship, that is, the physical intimacy such as acts of hugging and some rough housing. Worse yet, the older girl was perfectly aware of the effects she had on my growing body. Or in her words, the first time such a physical reaction occurred, she told me to my face, "You smell like cum." Needless to say, I was completely thrown off by her comment and contemplated ending the apprenticeship right there and then. Hannah had laughed at my reaction and then revealed that she was just teasing, but since then she took real pleasure watching me try and compose myself whenever she subtly unbuttoned her blouse to reveal some cleavage, claiming it was too hot, or bending over to pick something up for just a few moments too long to be considered appropriate, or even blatantly shoving my face in her chest just like right now. I knew that she wasn't attracted to me in that way after checking her status with observe. The teenage girl simply enjoyed my reactions from her unsubtle attempts at teasing a genius, getting some satisfaction from cracking the usually impassive appearance I put on. I would die before admitting to anyone, but in truth I did enjoy the view and the attention, as unbecoming as it may be. I was still a red-blooded male who enjoyed the affections of the opposite sex even if I was stuck in the body of a literal child at the moment. Hana-sensei, could you please let go of me? I requested politely. Ara, is my genius disciple being shy? Kyara, so cute. She squealed out and pressed her chest against the side of my face even further. I deadpanned and replied, no, because Zumdono is looking at you like she's thinking if she should call the police. Shocked, Hana immediately released me, standing at attention and sputtered out, wait Ka-san, I can explain. But upon looking around and finding any trace of the Inuzuka matriarch anywhere, my sensei realized that she had been tricked and spun towards me angrily only to catch me snickering at her antics. According to the Inuzuka's system of hierarchy, Hana's mother was the undisputed top dog of the clan. And as her daughter, Hana could be considered as having only one person above her in the family. But that also meant that if there was one person she feared, it was her mother. Which I found out and quite often used to my advantage since the Inuzuka matriarch often treated me like a second son due to my relationship with both Kiba and her daughter. She also pitied my background as an orphan, thinking I lacked the affection only a mother could give. So you think that's funny, huh? Hana asked threateningly before slowly walking towards me and unbuttoning the first 2 buttons of her shirt. When I catch you, you're gonna get the time of your life, Shinji-kun tilde. TSK, seriously Hana, you can't threaten me with a good time. Hajime. The Chunin instructor Iruka declared while the 2 students approached each other cautiously. It was finally the graduation exam, and it was currently the Taijutsu portion of the series of tests involved in graduating from the Shinobi Academy. The other students and I who were either done or waiting for their turns sat around the spectator stands watching the matches as they went on. Thus far, the written test, weapons accuracy evaluation and stealth assessment had concluded. What was left was only the Taijutsu competition and the ninjutsu showcase. For the first 3 tests I aced them all just as I planned to do so with the entire genin exam except for Taijutsu. The written exam tested both theory and critical thinking. Questions included history and foreign relations matters which tested your book smarts, but the other parts gave hypothetical scenarios that tested our critical thinking, analytical skills and strategic know-how. For example, a question could be something like, your teammate is being held hostage by an enemy combatant. Enemy size and strength are not known, and reinforcements are not available. What should you do? And the examines would be expected to provide their answers as well as their justifications for deciding on that course of action. How well you will be graded depended on the likelihood of success and how well reasoned your argument is. The weapons accuracy evaluation simply evaluated our proficiency with throwing weapons such as kunai and shuriken. Unlike the first accuracy test we participated in on our first day of the academy where the distance was only at 10 meters, the genin exam included multiple human-shaped targets in varying distances and behind an assortment of covers. Some might be hidden behind a tree and only half of the target can be seen or be partially concealed by branches while some targets would be placed in odd angles, all of which was to test our accuracy in a more realistic but controlled environment. The stealth assessment was rather crude and simple to be a criteria for graduation for future shinobis. We just had to make it to the other side of the corridor, which was booby-trapped with easily avoidable alarms like tripwires attached with bells or wind chimes that would make noise if we moved too fast past them. We were graded on how fast we could make it to the other side and how little noise we made while doing so. I honestly thought the stealth test to be exceedingly straightforward and easy. We weren't even tested on how well hidden we had to be, just that we couldn't make noise. How could a major aspect of stealth, which was to remain unseen, be neglected for an exam of sneakiness? Furthermore, stealth wasn't just hiding behind a barrel while crouching like a video game. For example, following someone through a crowd without being noticed by mingling with the crowd, standing close enough to a family to be mistaken as part of their group, looking at stall wares while actually keeping the target in eyesight, or losing pursuers by getting out of their sight line then immediately snagging a paper and sitting on a bench to read it inconspicuously while the pursuers ran by. But things like that weren't being tested. Because remaining unseen was not part of the test, I easily cleared the obstacle course in a matter of seconds, and I would have been faster had it not been for those meddling wind chimes limiting how fast I could go. Right now for the Taijutsu potion, we were ranked according to our Taijutsu grades from the last 4 years. Starting from first place down to the last, we were each assigned a number rank. For people like Sasuke and I who performed consistently well throughout the academy, we were the undisputed rank 1 and 2 of the list. While 3rd, 4th and 5th was a fierce competition between Shino, Kiba and surprisingly, Hinata. Hinata was a person who I had not expected to be as proficient as she appeared to be during the academy. Unlike Kanon, the Hyuga heiress seemed to have more confidence in her skills and performed at a level where a scion of the prestigious clan was expected to. For certain reasons, this version of Hinata possessed the self-assurance which did not correlate with the impression I had of her when I first interacted with the girl nor what I knew about her from the anime. Of course, during social interactions she was still as introverted as ever, unwilling to be the center of attention and would only speak when spoken to. But the stutter that seemed to have plagued the early days of her academy years faded away with time, and the girl no longer second-guessed anything that came out of her mouth. However, when it came to anything hands-on, the shy demeanor would be replaced with a mettle that seemed reminiscent of myself. In our 3rd year, when the academy stopped separating the girls and boys for physical challenges, Hinata quickly rocketed past the boys and proved herself worthy of contending with the physically superior males in her class with just pure technique and skill. The guys who underestimated her for her gender and reserved personality would pay the price and learn from their mistake the hard way. During spars, she would mercilessly and rapidly put down her opponent with accurately placed Jiyuken strikes. But the minute the match was called, Hinata would just as quickly apologize profusely before helping her opponent out of the ring. It was all the compassion I had come to know from her, but with a decisiveness and steel in her I was not expecting. Of course I was curious about the change, so I had once asked her about it before. Amidst some blushes and stammering that weirdly only occurred around me, she explained that a certain someone inspired her to become stronger and be more confident in herself. That newly found confidence then subsequently invited confidence and pride in her ability from her father, which was the impetus for her progress and eventual self-assurance. I had realized after speaking to her. It was obvious who that certain someone was. Knowing Hinata and the future, it could only be Naruto, of course. I was slightly confused as to why this change did not occur in canon if Naruto was still the object of her fancy and inspiration as he was in the anime, but I shrugged it off as irrelevant. Either way, she soon proved herself to be the top kunoichi of our year in all aspects of the curriculum with the exception of the theoretical portions, which she always narrowly lost out to Sakura. Anyways, after we were shown the rankings, which was all listed on a giant board next to the arena, the Chunin instructors explained how the Taijutsu examination would work. 1. Every student had 3 chances to challenge a student of a higher ranking, and students could only be challenged thrice. 2. The challenged student cannot refuse the challenge. 3. If the challenger won, they would take the rank of the challenged, who would be moved down a rank. 4. However, if the challenger lost, they would be moved down a rank too. The instructors explained that they were testing not just their physical prowess, but also the ability to accurately assess their own limitations as well as the ability to gauge their opponent's strength. A poor judgment and subsequent ill-thought-out decision to challenge someone objectively stronger than themselves would lead to a punishment in the form of a drop in rank. It was a deceptively elaborate examination that took into account more factors than it would first appear. This method of competition meant that the students in the lower echelons had to be smart about who they challenged, since they only had 3 chances to do so. There was even a possibility of colluding to challenge the same student and thus tire them out and letting the last challenger have a higher chance of ranking up. Additionally, while students in the higher rankings had to wait for their turn to challenge a higher ranking student in order to advance, they too had to be aware that they too would be the subject of being challenged by lower ranking students. Thus it was also an issue of whether they should conserve their energy when being challenged or go all out and ruthlessly defend their place. For Sasuke, who was already at the top of the rankings, he would only have to contend with being challenged 3 times. And if he won all 3 challenges, he would then get to remain in his first place ranking and be granted the highest grades. For me, who was only below my Uchiha cousin, the only person I could challenge was Sasuke, but it did not matter as I had no intentions of taking the first place spot away from him either way. Although, I would have to point out that the sentiment was not shared by said Uchiha. Sasuke deeply desired to fight me on a public stage. One was to prove himself against me, who he always lost against, and the other reason was the fact that he, in his own way, wanted me to be recognized for my strength too. The Uchiha was unsatisfied that he was always praised to be physically stronger than me, even though he never actually won in a real fight against me before. He thought it unfair I would never be recognized as being his better, and was thus frustrated I was willingly letting him take the credit. I thought it was sweet of him, but I truly was satisfied with just second place and thankfully managed to convince him of it. Furthermore, no matter how much he wanted to challenge me in the public arena, he wasn't allowed to, since higher ranked students could not challenge lower ranked students, because what was the point? Even if they won, their ranks would remain unchanged, whereas the lower ranked student would only be beaten and humiliated for no reason. The Taijutsu competition thus began from the bottom up, which for certain reasons consisted majority of the girls. We started with the bottom-most student, who would state who she wanted to challenge and then slowly move our way up the rankings. Every time someone won, which was honestly rare since the rankings weren't arbitrary and was formed from the results of our numerous spars throughout the 4 years, but it would still occasionally occur, and the rankings would change as a result. Most students would only tentatively challenge someone who was 1 or 2 ranks above themselves, cautious of overextending themselves and getting humiliated in front of an audience of their peers. The fights were slow, unentertaining and laughably pathetic, at least compared to the fights I usually fought in. Most of the girls, who were honestly more concerned with how they looked, barely even tried whenever they did challenge anyone. Some were content with their original ranks, so just passed on the opportunities to challenge anyone. Amongst them was Kaori. She was ranked #32, smack dab in the middle of the bottom half. Kaori was a kunoichi who could be considered painfully mediocre. Her talent, drive, and overall suitability to the life of a shinobi were all objectively unimpressive. In my defense, I didn't just leave her wallowing in her mediocrity. I tried helping by tutoring and training her so that she could at least be at a satisfactory level, but it was to no avail. My childhood friend was simply unmotivated to pursue the career of a shinobi. When I assigned her homework in the form of practicing taijutsu katas or catching up on the theoretical portions, she would turn up the next day claiming that she forgot, was too tired or simply lazy. When I tried training her physically though, Kaori would just give up halfway saying she was too tired and needed a break. Which would have been fine except that her breaks would last an hour and afterwards only training for 15 minutes before taking a break again. I didn't even know why she chose to enter the Shinobi Academy in the first place unless it was only for the monthly stipend given to orphans who were training to be Shinobi. She seemed content with her current status quo. I didn't hate the girl for her lack of motivation, just disappointed, and heck I could understand it too. It wasn't as if everyone aspired to be a career shinobi. For many, obtaining an official shinobi license wasn't just for the desire to become a soldier who ran around killing and assassinating. There were many benefits to signing up to become a shinobi for Konoha: tax deductibles, generous pension schemes upon retirement which required a minimum 10 years of service or permanent injury, and not to mention the lucrative compensation from missions and a range of other benefits. Many would retire upon reaching the minimum years of service and start their own businesses using the tax breaks from their veteran status or simply living a carefree life off their retirement pension. Neither did the village expect more than 30% of their shinobi to even be promoted past genin in the first place. There was a reason why only an average 33.3% of teams passed the real graduation test. The village only selected around 3 or 4 teams to be actively groomed by elite jounin every year. These were the students evaluated to have the highest potential of breaking past Chuunin rank, and thus the village would not hold back on cultivating these promising genin. Team assignments didn't happen by chance nor were they randomly allocated. It was no coincidence that the most prominent clan members were typically grouped together. It was by design of the village leaders. The other graduates would be assigned to an unofficial genin corp, becoming career genins who were functionally assigned busy work such as patrols, guard posts and similarly low-stakes missions. Thus there wasn't really a need for them to push themselves to become stronger when being a mediocre genin with average skills was enough for the missions they would undertake anyways. Unfortunately for Kaori, she possessed not the talent to achieve particularly stellar results nor the motivation to push through with pure effort. However, that was not to say that the village was particularly heartless to their less than stellar genin when compared to other villages. It was because Konoha was such a prosperous and militarily strong village that we could spare the manpower of having 3 or 4 elite jounin pulled from the front lines to, in essence, babysit 3 fresh genin every year in the first place. Other villages did not have such a luxury, only assigning 1 or at most 2 jounin to properly groom their genin teams every year. While I was lost in my thoughts, several fights that had been going on for some time passed by. Utterly underwhelming performances by equally lackluster students. Iruka then called out the next challenger. #21, Uzumaki Naruto. #21, Uzumaki Naruto. The blonde jumped up at the sound of his name being called. Yosha. It's finally my turn, Datbeo. He ran into the arena and even before Iruka prompted him to challenge anyone, the Jinchuriki pointed in my direction. Or rather, he was pointing at the boy sitting next to me. I challenge Sasuke. It's time for me to take your number 1 spot. Naruto exuberantly declared. A moment of silence passed by before many of the students gathered here burst into laughter amidst jeers and mockery. Know your own limits, dead last. What a joke. Take this seriously, Yomoran. You think you can defeat Sasuke-kun? In what universe, Baker? Naruto's eyebrow twitched and shouted, "Ah, shut up. Just see who will be the one laughing after I defeat Sasuke-kun." Iruka simply shook his head at Naruto's challenge. Naruto, you only have 3 chances to challenge someone. Don't forget that if you lose, you will drop down a rank. You understand that, right? The blonde merely grinned in return. Losing hasn't even crossed my mind, Iruka-sensei. Just watch me kick that Tom's ass. I turned to Sasuke next to me, and the Uchiha coldly stared ahead, appearing without much concern over the challenge. But I could see his fists tightening at Naruto's proclamation. He looked at me and scoffed, "Pfft, what an idiot." Naruto have always had a tense relationship with Sasuke ever since the Uchiha defeated him in their first spar on the first day of the academy. The blonde was desperate to prove himself superior to the publicly recognized strongest Taijutsu practitioner in our year, while the raven-haired Avenger only got more and more annoyed at Naruto's constant provocations in what he perceived as delusions of grandeur. Though I always tried to mediate his temper, Sasuke frequently got more heavy-handed in his beatdown of the blonde as compared to other students. This only further motivated Naruto to try again next time with greater tenacity than before. Iruka frowned at Naruto's claims, but rules were rules, so as the instructor he had to oblige Naruto's challenge regardless of how foolish it was. Fine then. Sasuke, come down to the ring. Said Uchiha stood up and cracked his neck. Before he could move, however, I stopped him. He looked down and I said, "End it as quickly as you can. Don't waste energy on him when you have 2 more challenges after this." "Yeah, I got it." I nodded and released my hand on him. Sasuke made his way down to the ring and looked at his opponent with a frigid indifference. Naruto grinned in response, "Everyone's going to watch me beat you into a pulp, Sasuke-kun." My cousin simply ignored the provocation, not even bothering to get into a stance, which only further incensed his opponent. But before he could continue, Iruka cut in. "Fighters ready? Ready to beat him up?" Naruto answered with fighting spirit. Sasuke nodded but continued being unconcerned over the approaching duel. Iruka acknowledged their answers and yelled out, "Hajime." As soon as the instructor started their duel, Naruto rushed at Sasuke, a fist cocked back and ready to slug it into the Uchiha. Sasuke scoffed, sneering at the slowness and ineptitude of his opponent. He waited for Naruto to approach before smoothly sidestepping the wild swing and landing a solid straight punch on Naruto's jaw with deadly accuracy and efficiency. After years of training with me, Sasuke was leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else in class in terms of spatial awareness, timing, and fight IQ. All of which earned through literal blood, sweat and tears. The difference in experience between Sasuke and Naruto was as vast as the distance between the heavens and the earth. I ignored the guilt over uplifting the Uchiha genius so far above the true protagonist of this world and watched as Sasuke continued his merciless assault on the boy. The Uchiha unleashed a combo while fluidly parrying and effortless evading the desperate attempts at counter-attacking from the Jinchuriki. A jab to the throat, a right hook to the liver, and a high kick to Naruto's temple saw the boy launched backwards. Sasuke jumped on the downed boy and finished the fight with 2 more punches before Iruka pulled him off Naruto. Unlike the more harmless spars we usually fought in at the academy, for this Taijutsu competition, the fighters were allowed to pull no punches and attack even if the opponent went down. This was to reflect a more realistic portrayal of fighting hostile enemy combatants in the real world. The fight was only stopped if one side yielded, knocked out, or if the referee decided that the fight was over, since one side could no longer defend themselves. Winner by technical knockout, Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke will retain his rank, and Naruto has been demoted to #22. Iruka declared while turning to the downed blonde to check on his injuries. Mitsuki, who was next to a giant board with the list of names and our respective ranks, shifted Naruto's nameplate down a spot. However, Iruka's concern was unneeded as Naruto jumped up seemingly no worse for wear. "Ha! What happened? Iruka-sensei. Why did you stop the match?" The Chunin frowned and chided, "I told you all at the start, if I see that you can no longer defend yourself, then I will use my best judgment and step in to stop the fight." But, I had him on the ropes, Iruka-sensei," Naruto complained. "Enough of your nonsense, you lost. Now you have 2 more chances to issue a challenge, or you can pass and remain in your current rank." "What will it be?" Naruto gritted his teeth but answered anyways, "Fine. Then I challenge Sasuke again." Iruka frowned again, "Weren't you listening when I explained the rules? You can't challenge the same person twice if you lost the first time. And if the challenged student loses, they are not allowed to challenge the person who beat them again." The blonde stomped his feet in a tantrum. "Gah, what kind of bullshit? Naruto. Don't waste everyone's time. Will you challenge someone else or not?" "HMPH, fine. If I can't challenge number 1, then I will challenge number 2 then." He leveled a gaze at me and pointed, "Shinji. It's time for me to take your spot as Rookie of the Year." With that proclamation, laughter once again broke out amongst the spectators as my own supporters jeered at my challenger. Iruka face-palmed, "Naruto, sigh, I don't even know what is running through your head at this point, but whatever. Shinji, come down." I shrugged and complied, passing by Sasuke, who was walking back up to our seats. The Uchiha smirked at me and cheekily parroted what I instructed him a minute ago, "End it as quickly as you can. Don't waste energy on him when you have 2 more challenges after this." Yeah, shut it." I made my way down and faced the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. I felt bad, but I wasn't about to let Naruto take my rank. But I could still show some mercy and not utterly humiliate him by ending it as quickly and as painlessly as possible. My relationship with the boy wasn't as fraught with hostility as the one-sided rivalry between him and Sasuke. Although I always beat him, I was also always gracious in my victory, so the boy took little offense at losing to me. Iruka turned to the both of us and asked, "Fighters ready?" "Ever ready, Datbeo." "Hi, Iruka-sensei." "Hajime." Naruto once again repeated his strategy that had been utilized against Sasuke: run and swing while banking on the chance his enemy would foolishly stand there and take it. I didn't want to hurt the blonde too badly, so I took the initiative to meet him in the middle. With ease, I dodged his first punch and took hold of the outstretched wrist. Using his momentum against him, I pulled Naruto and threw him to the ground. Upon doing so, I quickly snaked my arm around his neck and pulled him into a rear naked choke hold. I tightened my grip around his throat and waited for the eventual submission, which did not come as Naruto continued to futilely resist. He struggled against the tight hold I had, trying desperately to pry my forearm away from his vulnerable throat, but it was ultimately a futile attempt. As the seconds ticked by and the oxygen continued being withheld from his brain as a result of my chokehold, soon enough the struggling slowly weakened and then came to a near stop. But before I actually choked him into unconsciousness, I took it upon myself to release the boy who slumped onto the ground, nearly unconscious but still breathing. Iruka was just a step away from pulling me off but breathed out a sigh in relief when he saw that I willingly released my opponent on my own accord. Winner by submission, Shinji Ikari. Shinji will retain his rank, and Naruto has been demoted to #23. He crouched down to inspect Naruto, checking for signs of consciousness before the boy gasped and instantly sat up. What happened? Did I win? He asked in confusion, which only invited more mockery and laughter from the audience. Iruka shook his head. Nope, you got choked out and fainted. So, I won? Naruto asked with the disorientation associated with nearly being choked into unconsciousness. Nope, you lost, again. Ugh, damn it, I got one more try right. The Chunin sighed in exasperation. I mean, yeah, but I wouldn't. Naruto jumped up and now pointed at Hinata. In that case, it's time for number 3. Iruka face-palmed and shook his head in defeat. If Naruto wanted to continue his foolishness then as an objective Chunin instructor come referee, he was in no position to stop him. The fight was similarly over in just a few seconds, with the Hyuga RS accurately disabling Naruto's Tenketsu points and removing the boy's ability to move properly. Seeing that Naruto could no longer fight properly, Iruka called the fight and declared Hinata the winner, to Naruto's protest unsurprisingly. I was surprised to see the girl defeating Naruto with such ease and without any hesitance given what I knew of her infatuation with the Jinchuriki. But she probably figured that Naruto would only be offended if she took it easy on the boy and let him win on purpose. With all 3 chances to challenge a higher-ranked student used up, Naruto was now stuck at rank #24, being demoted down 3 times consecutively. Good news was that all the students below him could no longer challenge anyone else, so there was also no way for him to be demoted any further. Similarly, upon seeing how easily we dealt with Naruto, even if he was considered to just be a dead last, the other students were too fearful to challenge Sasuke and I. However, Hinata was a different story. Even if her fighting style was frighteningly efficient and deadly, she was still seen as just a girl, and therefore she received 2 other challenges from the other boys. Which infuriated Kiba, because since Hinata received 3 separate challenges, he could no longer challenge her in order to get her #3 rank. And he was also aware of the disparity between him and the top 2 students, so he had no further chance to move up in rank. Shino declined to challenge Kiba, making a rational decision to avoid the possibility of being moved down a rank if he lost. And with that, the Taijutsu competition ended with no further surprises. The final ranks. #1 Uchiha Sasuke. #2 Shinji Ikari. #3 Hyuga Hinata. #4 Inuzuka Kiba. #5 Aburame Shino. #11 Akimichi Choji. #19 Narashikamaru. #24 Uzumaki Naruto. #27 Yamane Karino. #30 Hirano Sakura. #32 Kaori. Of course these numbers only represented their taijutsu grades and was not representative of their overall grades. For example, even though the physical portion of Sakura's grades were relatively low, her theory results were as good as mine, nearly full marks, which pulled up her average by a fair bit. And though Naruto's taijutsu grades were pretty okay, everything else of his was near or at the bottom, including the next part of the genin exam, the ninjutsu exhibition, which pulled his overall grades to dead last. That's it guys. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel, and also make sure you tell me your recommendation in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.